Oh my God, we're live. Hello everyone. It's Sunday once again, and it's just gone 4 minutes past 2 o'clock here in the UK, which is 4 minutes past 9 in Manila. I hope my friends from Nue Bayan are watching us live today because thank you so much for helping me with this episode. I really appreciate it. Also, I mean, today's today's Ask the Drummer is really exciting because not only is our guest a Manc drumming legend, but it's very important for us as well, especially to Aiden, our tech support, and my husband, of course, because he's been a massive fan of him, of our guest and his band right from the start. So this one's for you, Aiden. He's watching it from the living room, I think. So, right, we've got so many questions that you've sent in for our guest today. So we'll just better crack on, as they say here in the UK. So, right, my dear friends, coming to us live from the Outer Hebrides. Please welcome the Manc drumming legend, Mr. John Maher. Woohoo!
Hello there.
I mean, I'm gonna say hello, John, but sometimes I feel like no, he's such a legend. I should really call him Mr. Ma.
John's fine.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm okay, thanks. Yeah, recovered from my trip down to Glasgow.
Oh, yeah, that was amazing. And once again, I want to publicly apologize to you, Mr. Pastel, and Paul Hanley for walking out, but I really had to because I would have missed my bus otherwise back to Manchester. So I'm really sorry about that.
No,
Um,
I think it's Mr. Pastel should apologise for not starting on time.
the Outer
I'm going to.
Hebrides. Um, like I said to you, I emailed to you before that it just sounds so unreal to me. I mean, I'm originally from the Philippines, and to me, the place sounds like a mythical. It's like a mythical place, where the gods live. It's like like Hades and Zeus or Mars, where you live. Um, what's it like? What's it like there?
How do you explain that? It's obviously very different to Manchester, but yeah, I guess if you actually want to find out what it's really like, you have to come and visit, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Which
Well,
I did many times back in the 90s. Yeah, mid 90s, around the mid 90s when I first came up, myself and my wife on holiday, and we did that several times, kept coming back, and then ultimately that kind of led to a move here in that would be 2002. So it's over 20 years now that I've been here.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our first question actually from someone called Chris Gay. Uh, why they wanted to know why did you move to Scotland? It said lovely scenery, but how do you find the weather?
It's not. I wouldn't say it's massively different to Manchester. Well, it is in some respects. I mean, you get. It's a lot windier here. It can get really, really windy, and obviously, it's very short days in the winter, but very long days in the summer. Um,
But
so
you
I,
obviously love it. You obviously love it there because
yeah,
22 years you've been.
yeah, yeah, I'm quite happy here. I'm not planning to move back to Manchester, not at the moment,
No.
anyway.
Well, I looked up the Isle of Harris because you're in the Isle of Harris,
Hmm.
and the population is like 2,000.
Yeah,
And I
it's
looked
actually a
up.
bit less than that. Yeah.
Oh, really? Because I
Mhm.
looked up the population of Greater Manchester. It's over 2 million. It was like if you think about 2,000 and then compared to where you were born or where you were from, it's like it's quite a lot. And also, it says that 60% of the population speak Gaelic. Is that
Well, Gaelic, if you want
Ga-
the
oh, Gaelic.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. It's
it's
not even like
yeah,
Gaelic.
it's called Gaelic here, whereas the Irish form of that language, which has a lot of similarities, is Gaelic. but
Yeah.
yeah, Scots Gaelic. Um, I don't. I don't speak. I've picked up a few words along the way, but I've not found it essential to get by here.
Yeah. Is it not? Because do you know in Northern Wales or North Wales, when you go there, the locals will actually speak in their local language if they see someone who's not from around there. Do you find the same thing in the Isle of Iris, or they all just talk to you in English?
No, not really. It's one of the things I particularly liked right from the first time I visited was you just kind of I didn't pick up any sense of not you not being welcomed or whatever. So I found the local people, particularly once they get to know what you're about and that they're very accepting. So I couldn't move to and live in a place where I didn't feel welcome,
Yeah, yeah,
So whatever it is about this area, it's kind of clicked with me, and I do appreciate that. I like it.
yeah. Do you know most of the 2,000 people living there? It's-
Um, I've never really thought about that. I certainly don't know them all, but yeah, I suppose when you're in a small community like that, you're at least on nodding acquaintance with a lot of them. Um, so yeah, it's actually really nice living in a smaller a smaller community. I think a lot of things work. I find a lot of things work much better because of the smaller number of people. It has its disadvantages, I guess. There's pros and cons. It's like everything else. There's pros and cons.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, Aiden said that sound and vision excellent. That Aiden, our tech support, and my husband, he's the one who's the biggest fan of Buzzcocks. Right from the start, because he's from Manchester, Stockport
Okay.
actually. But yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, he said it's good. But before we actually continue, I just wanted to say massive shout out to Paul Hanley. He's got a new book out called 16 Again. And that's the reason why I got to meet you because you were in Glasgow with Mr. Pastel, and actually last year he was on Astro Drummer and he told me about you, and he said look him up, and I'm sure he'll be okay to do Astro Drummer, and I did, and I found your website and sent you an email via your
Right.
contact form. But unfortunately, you said that you didn't actually receive it. So I'm really glad that I went to Glasgow to meet you. And but anyways, yeah, this is really good. This book is so good. So if anyone wants to know about Buzzcocks and Manchester music, do get this one. Um, right. So welcome to Ask the Drummer. Episode 130 is all about you, John Maher, the legend.
I don't know.
Johnny Marr. Johnny Marr had to change his name from John Maher. And this is like a legal change as well. It's not just like a stage name or a musician's name, but he actually changed his name to Johnny Marr. What do you think of that?
Well, I didn't make him do it. Um, But I met first time I met him was in about 2012, I think it was. I was on a trip down to Manchester, and he asked if we could have a meet up, and we had a chat, and that was really good. We met up in this cafe in Manchester, and I actually asked him about this because I heard various stories as to why he changed his name, and basically he said he was traveling home on the bus one day, having purchased Spiral Scratch, and of course, when people of a certain age can relate to that. You went into town, you bought a record, and you're going back home on the bus, and of course you're inspecting the sleeve, you're reading all the sleeve notes, and on the back of Spiral Scratch got my name on there, which obviously exactly the same as his, same spelling, everything.
Yeah,
He's of Irish descent as well, and
yeah,
yeah, basically when it got time for him to, the Smiths was coming about, and he didn't want to get confused with the drummer out of Buzzcocks, but also, which obviously can relate to, is the going through your life with people mispronouncing your name all the time, because a lot of people say it's Mayer. So I must admit, I'm very impressed that you said John Maher, because that's how it is pronounced. And then I suppose, yeah, he changed it to Johnny Marr, spelt it Marr, so it's phonetic.
Yeah.
It's kind of trips off the tongue much easier. So it's quite a smart move on his part doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think he's actually over in Ireland at the moment. There was this is a little Johnny Marr connection. There's a guy over in Ireland called Colm Walsh, and
Mhm.
he got Johnny. Colm Walsh is from an area of Ireland called Athy, which is where Johnny Marr's parents were from, and my dad was from around that area also. And Colm Walsh had instigated this project of like a musician's trail or some
Yeah.
such, which involved musicians from that area of Ireland. And of course, he latched on to Johnny. Also, then Manny out of the Stone Roses, his parents lived just down the road from Johnny's parents. And there's this little series of plaques been erected in various parts around there, and I've got pictures of it. I've not seen it in person yet. Hopefully, I'll get back over there one day. There's a plaque with my name on it on a junction in the centre of a thigh. John Maher, Buzzcocks drummer, so on, so
Yeah.
on. So yeah, there's a plaque on the wall with for me, one for Johnny, and one for Manny.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I was actually going to ask you about it. But you're not related to Johnny Marr at all.
No, not that I'm aware of, unless there's some very 17th cousin of a something like that. But no, don't think there's any direct connection, family
Yeah,
connection anyway.
yeah, because it's just so like a coincidence that his parents are also from that place, Athai,
Mhm.
and then your father was also from that place.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's good. I mean, I would like to go and see that music trail because, like you mentioned, Manny was also got a plaque
yeah,
there as well,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's
That's
in
right.
County Kildare.
But
Yeah,
there was an awful lot of Irish people moved over to Manchester in the 50s. That's certainly when my parents moved over, and Johnny's also. And the area that I was born and brought up in Old Trafford, that was a lot of Irish families living around that area. It's not a massive surprise. Well, it's kind of weird that there's three Manchester musicians all with very close connections to that area of Ireland, but it's because there was such an influx of Irish people into Manchester in the 50s and early 60s.
yeah. So Old Trafford, you said. I thought it was when I went to the talk 2 weeks ago. I thought it was Wally Range. So you're actually from
Oh, right. Yeah,
Old Trafford.
I can't remember now whether that was maybe was that Paul Hanley sort of trying having
Yeah,
a
because
little.
you said that you're from the posh side of Manchester, which is Wally
That's
Range, and
right.
he's
Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
Wythenshawe, so like which is
Yeah,
not posh.
no, well, the actual postal address for where Milner Street, where I lived, is Old Trafford, but it is
Right.
it's right on the border of Whalley Range, and Whalley Range is the school where we also mentioned on that chat in Glasgow about myself and Paul Hanley both went to the same school, St Bede's,
Yeah.
which was in Whalley Range. The where I lived was pretty much right on the border. Postal address was Old Trafford, but it's very, very close to the edge of Whalley Range and also quite close to Moss Side as well.
Yeah.
So, whereas Paul was out, I don't
Is it
think he was born in
Wythenshawe then?
Wythenshawe. Yeah, but
Yeah.
and Johnny Marr was living in Wythenshawe as well. But
Yeah.
Wythenshawe's a
Yeah.
kind of interesting place because I don't know if it still counts as the largest council house estate in Europe, but it certainly was back when I was living in Manchester.
Yeah. Well, another amazing drummer from Wythenshawe is Donald Johnson, of course, with a certain
Oh
ratio.
yeah,
I mean, that he's from there.
right.
But are you from a musical family?
Not really. No.
No.
I think my dad. I never saw him playing the pipes. That would be bagpipes. Now, to be honest, I don't even know if it's like the bagpipes that you physically blow into, or whether it be the Irish version where you
Like,
sort of pump the bag with your elbow.
oh, I see. Okay.
But I remember him talking about it, but never witnessed him actually playing them. So not
No.
especially. There was a record player in the house, and there was lots of a selection of Irish records. My mum was
Oh,
into,
okay.
people like
Yeah,
Jim
yeah.
Reeves and so on. But mm, no.
Well, Ildy Berry sent a message saying, "John, you are so like your dad in his younger days." Ildy
Ildy used to
Berry.
live on our street, so
Oh,
that's why. Yeah, that's. I think she might be still good friends with my younger sister. I've not seen Ildy in decades, but I know the name, and
yeah.
that's why she's familiar with my dad. Yeah.
Oh, right. And are they still alive, your mum and dad?
No,
They're still
no,
around?
both parents passed on now. We
Oh, I
lost
see.
my
So, yeah.
dad. I think that was around. Oh God, it sounds terrible. I can't remember the year. But about 2013,
Oh,
and my mum shortly after. So no, both gone now.
yeah, yeah. Um, so, but you've always been to music. You like
Um,
listening to records and, you know.
yeah, yeah. I think to me that was just the norm for most kids at that time. Maybe I guess I was probably a bit compared to a lot of the kids at school. Maybe I was a little bit more into music than they were because I
Yeah.
decided to take it a little bit further than just an interest.
What got you into drums though? Mary Ma. I don't know if she's related. Is she related to you?
I've got two sisters, both younger than me, and Mary's the eldest sister.
Oh, right. Well, Mary Ma said, "What made you really want to trial out a drum kit?" And at that point, were you already thinking that I want to be in a band?
Um, Right, I started off. I wanted to be a guitarist in a band, so I started off playing guitar. Eventually, got to the point where I realised I wasn't very good at it, and also felt I probably was never going to be very good at it. And I thought, well, if you want to be in a band, what? And guitar's not an option. So the brief version of that story is I used to look in the music papers at the music adverts where people were looking for musicians, and there was always
Yeah.
loads of adverts from bands wanting a drummer because drummers were thin on the ground. So basically, it was just a cold, calculated decision that, well, if I become a drummer, I'm far like it's going to be so much easier to get in a band because there aren't many of them about. So
Yeah.
once I got that idea in my head, but I then started watching drummers because I'd never really given them much thought. It was just a noise that was always there. I didn't really look into the technical aspect of it. So just basically, whenever there was a band on TV, like Top of the Pops or whatever,
Yeah.
where if there was a band on, I'd be looking out for what is the drummer actually doing, and then you can figure out the very basics of it, and then actually go in the front room at my parents' house and then start kind of air drumming to put a record on and start
Yeah.
miming to it, and I've eventually decided that yeah, I reckon I could give this a go. So traded in I'd accumulated. I had an electric guitar, a cheap one. I had a cheap amp, speaker cabinet that myself and my dad had made. We took them along to a music shop in Manchester. This was near as I think it might have even been on my 16th birthday, and first of all, what I did, I rented a drum kit for a week. It cost me a tenner
Yeah.
to rent it for a week, and then it was on the basis that if the next week I'd either bring the drum kit back or I'd come back and buy it. And
Yeah.
so the following Saturday, the weird thing is that when I brought that drum kit home, because I've been doing my sort of
Yeah.
practice drumming.
Sorry about that. I mean, I asked you before. I mean, don't you miss that sound coming when you're in the house? So
Right.
we live on the main road in Stockport. That's why it's got all these. So like, sorry. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I brought that drum kit home, and because I've been doing my little bit of air drum practice in the front room,
yeah,
and I kind of roughly knew how to set a drum kit up because I've been watching so many drummers on TV, and I could basically sort of more or less knock out a very basic beat almost straight away, which was really that was a great start to get off to. So of
wow,
course we kept the drum kit, traded in all the guitar gear, and
yeah,
started bashing away, trying to play along to records in the house. And of course, my sister living in the same house. A little cheeky answer to her is that the reason that I got into drums was just so I could annoy the hell out of her and everyone else in the house, which I did. So then the drum kit had to. How do you get the drum kit out of the house and the join a band? You
Yeah.
know. So
Well,
then,
did you have drumming lessons though? Because a few weeks ago I went to see Mike Joyce, and he actually said that you had drumming lessons with someone called Jeff Riley.
Mhm. Yeah, right. I didn't. That was much later. So I didn't have any drum lessons prior to joining Buzzcocks. It was probably about it's probably getting on for a couple of years into that, and
See?
just probably a little bit of paranoia that you not paranoia exactly, but you get this feeling that you've learned what you've learned by just sort of doing it your own way. And then the more you get into the drumming side of things, you realise that there are technical things that I cannot do this. So I thought I ought to go and get some lessons off like a proper a professional teacher. And Jeff
Yeah.
Riley, at that time, I was already we'd got a bit of a deal with Premier, the drum factory in Leicester, and I was playing Premier drums by that time. And they also had a range of books, and one of the books was by this guy called Jeff Riley, who happened to live in Manchester, who lived in Urmston. And
Oh, see.
so I'd got his book from Premier, and I thought, well, maybe I can learn something from this guy. So I went along to him. I think I only went about 4 or 5 times.
Oh,
Um, his first, I think he was I think he lost his patience with me in a way. Because I remember, he at the very first time I went round, he just said that I had got a colossal amount of bad habits, and which
yeah, yeah.
in technical terms is probably absolutely true. And he'd give me a bit of homework, and it just got to that thing, like I think I went once a week for 5 or 6 weeks. And this
Oh,
homework, I always ended up putting it off till about an hour before I had to go over to his house. I wasn't a good pupil.
no.
Um, I didn't make life easy for him. So I
Yeah.
kind of thought, well, it's taken me a couple of years to accumulate all these bad habits, and so they're my bad habits, and they'll have to do.
Yeah. Well, Mike Joyce actually said that the reason he went to Jeff Riley as well for drum lessons is because if Jeff Riley's good enough for John Maher, he's good enough for me. So,
Well, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Mary, your sister said that you annoyed us all with the racket, but we are so glad you carried on. So that's what Mary said. So
Right,
thank you
fair
for
enough.
joining us live, Mary. Um, Before you actually joined Buzzcocks when you were 16, when you were 14 years old, this I found on the internet as well. You won a competition to see Slade.
Hmm.
There was like, I mean, you're obviously a fan of Slade because you joined that competition. What exactly did you have to do to win it?
Oh, I don't even know what that was. The competition was in the Manchester Evening News, and it was right around the time that Slade had done this film called Slade in Flame. It's a tale about how murky and dreadful the music industry is. It's actually a
Yeah.
really, really good film. Um, and so, yeah, this competition cropped up in the Manchester Evening News, and I say I can't remember what the question was, but it'll have been when they ask some really stupid question, it was probably like, what was Slade's last number one single, or something really
Oh yeah, yeah,
simple.
just an easy one. So like,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
to get
easy.
people.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and there were, I think it was either, I think there were four prize winners, and I got picked up from school and taken into the Manchester Odeon because that's where the film was going to be shown. It was opening the following weekend. So
yeah,
Slade were there doing all their promo stuff, and part of that was, these four school kids went along, had their pictures taken with them. And I'm so glad that the Manchester Evening News, they sent us a couple of 10x8s in the post about 4 or 5 days after the thing, and fortunately my mum kept hold of that one of me with Slade, because it's such a I just look
Yeah.
like a 14-year. I'm actually even I was the only one of the winners that was wearing school uniform.
Oh, but were you already? Because you said that you wanted to be a guitarist, so you weren't really into drums. So you were
No,
sitting next to Don Powell at the
that's
time.
right. Yeah.
What did you think of him? Were you so were you really more into what's his name, Dave Hill, or?
Not really. I think it was just the excitement of getting to meet them. They were the first band. We all have that band that you first ever get into and get really, really heavily interested in. And for
Yeah.
me, that was Slade. They were the first. That was the first album I ever bought. That was a Slade album, and the first band I ever actually went to see live was Slade as well. That was at Bellevue in when would that have been? That must have been just before, just a little bit before winning that competition. So
Yeah, yeah.
that was just all.
That's amazing. It was like winning that, and it's all like having you as the two legends there, but didn't know at the time. Don Powell and John Maher, together, photograph.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So when you you were 16 when you joined Bus. Oh, you're one of the founding members of Buzzcocks, because they weren't called that at the time, were they? I mean, they were just.
No, they were. They actually did do sort of a gig before I joined and before
Yeah.
Steve Diggle joined, but it was just at Bolton Institute of Technology. Obviously, I can only relate what I heard after the fact because I wasn't involved. And that was around about April 1976. And they did a cover version of Diamond Dogs, and they did one other track, and then they got the plugs pulled on them because the organizer in the college thought they were dreadful.
Oh,
Um,
oh dear.
so, but, yeah, the band really didn't start properly until Howard and Pete, because obviously you'll know, Howard Devoto was the original singer, and a lot of what happened about getting the band together would never have happened if Howard hadn't done what he did, going down to London to find the Sex Pistols, meeting Malcolm McLaren. They said that they wanted to form a band and do, similar kind of energetic type of music. Malcolm said, well, if you can get us a gig in Manchester, because the Sex Pistols were very keen to play outside of London. If you get us a gig up in Manchester, you get your band together and you can play on the same bill as us. So it was that sort of enthusiasm and drive that Pete and Howard had that made that happen, and I got dragged into it.
That's brilliant, because I mean, the most amazing thing about it is like not many musicians or not many drummers can say that their first ever gig was a legendary one, because everybody's still talking about that, Leicester Free Trade Hall with Sex Pistols and everything. But you were there, and it was like people were saying that they were there or something, but apparently there were only like 40 people in that room or something.
That's because the first one, there were two Sex Pistols gigs in Manchester in '76 at the Leicester Free Trade Hall. So the first one was early June '76. But what happened there was Pete and Howard and Pete had not got the band together in time for that. So Buzzcocks didn't play that one. That's the one where there was about 30 or 40 people in attendance.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it was actually that night that I think it was June the 4th. It was that night that Steve Diggle was recruited. Bizarre story. He'd gone along to meet somebody else outside the hall, he'd arranged to meet some guy who was putting a band together. Nothing to do with the Sex Pistols at all. He didn't even know that the Pistols were playing in the Leicester Free Trade Hall that night. But because he'd agreed to meet this guy outside the Free Trade Hall, Malcolm McLaren basically came downstairs, because Leicester Free Trade Hall was a small venue up above the main Free Trade Hall. And Malcolm McLaren went downstairs because it's like there's hardly anybody in, and he was trying to get people in off the street, and he found Steve hanging around outside, and Steve said, no, I'm not here for the gig, I'm here to I'm meeting the guy about joining the band. And Malcolm McLaren adds two and two together. He knows that Howard and Pete are looking for band members, so he thought, you're looking for Pete and Howard, come in, and introduce them.
Oh wow!
And so that was like this weird accidental thing that's how Steve ended up joining. So that was early June. I'm not sure if they'd already arranged for the Pistol to come back July the 20th. Yeah. So that's about 6 weeks later. That left Howard, Pete, and Steve needed a drummer. So it was in that gap in between where they got hold of me. It was shortly after that first gig that I got roped in.
And then So it's the second. It's the second Sex Pistols gig. That was your first gig.
That was officially that was Buzzcocks' first gig, and my first.
Wow.
As well.
I've got to say, I mean, coming originally from the Philippines, and the reason why I have to ask my fellow Filipino music fans, because I have to make sure that Buzzcocks never really reached us. It's not like with Sex Pistols and The Clash and the Ramones, which is why for us this is all new. It's like, I mean, Ever Fallen in Love. I mean, we know that song, but we know it as a Fine Young Cannibal song. It's not really. It's not like a Buzzcocks song. So it's like, but anyway. So when you were 16, that was your first gig. The second Sex Pistols gig at the Leicester Free Trade Hall. But apparently, according to Google, you had to leave school, and you quit school, and you said to the headmaster that you said that you're gonna join a punk band, and just seeing a photograph that you're actually at St. Bede's.
Yeah.
St. Bede's is like, when I came here in 1996. For me, it's like, if ever I'm going to have a child, I want my child to go to St. Bede's.
Back then, St. Bede's was a boys-only school. It's a boy and girls school now, isn't it? And they, something that slightly annoyed me probably a year or so ago. Somebody said that, he went to private school, and I said, it wasn't. I did pass my 11 plus, and on the form, where my parents had to decide which school I was going to be sent to, there were three. There was St. Bede's. There was I can't even remember the names of the other two.
Severian, maybe.
That's it.
Severian.
Yeah, spot on. And then I always thought it was quite funny that because there's a little box where they asked you to please explain why you would like your son to go to St. Bede's, and my mum wrote in that because it's quite it's nearby, it's less than a mile away from where we lived, and I thought that's probably not what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say because I've heard it's a very good Catholic school and there's a high standard of teaching and all that. But for whatever reason, I was accepted in. So that school was just a bike ride away from where I lived. And in fact, I used to cycle home for my lunch. And weirdly enough, it was during a lunchtime that Howard Devoto knocked on the door. I was actually I was doing my O-levels at the time. So this is before the school summer holidays in '76. So it'll be early June, obviously. And so I'd cycled home and knock on the door, and it was Howard. And this came about through a music advert that we'd both responded to in one of the music papers. And somebody passed on Howard my address, and he just called round on spec and invited me around to the to where he lived in Salford at the time for a rehearsal the
Yeah,
following
yeah.
Saturday. So that was
Where did
it.
the Buzzcocks? Where did it come from? The name?
The name,
Does it mean anything?
um, well, it kind of does. It was when Howard and Pete had met each other at Bolton Institute of Technology, and they were reading NME. It was a review of the Sex Pistols, and there was something about that review that got them both interested. So these sound like this sounds really exciting. Let's go and see them. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is really funny is that in the in the flat that Howard was living in at the time, there was a woman also lived in the same house. She was going away for the weekend, and she offered to lend Howard her car, and just in case she thought he might want to nip into Manchester and get some shopping or whatever, not
Yeah.
expecting him to actually her car and Pete Shelley all the way down to London to see.
Oh God.
Uh, to track down the Sex Pistols. So anyway, part of that journey, they picked up a copy of Time Out, the magazine that lists all
Yeah.
the events, because they were looking to see if the Pistols were playing anywhere. And there was an interview in Time Out magazine with the cast of a music drama that had just come on TV at that time called Rock Follies.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And one of the people in the interview said, if you come to London if you want to get a buzz cock, and that's like northern terminology. Like you come to London if you want to get a buzz, and then
Oh, right.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
buddy, mate, pal.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I don't know whether it probably Howard, I guess, that saw the combination and put the two together and thought that'd be a great
Oh.
name for the band. So that's where it comes from.
Oh, that's brilliant. No, I was yeah, because you still hear like old dear saying cock to people. Like, hello cock. Like, yeah. So that's where it is. So you've got buzz cock. I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Okay.
It was probably appealed to Howard as well because you've got the name the Sex Pistols and that Buzzcock has potentially a similar connotation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so
Well,
there you go.
Howard Devoto for us actually because he left Buzzcocks earlier on, but in the Philippines we know him as the singer of he did Rainy Season.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that was massive in the Philippines. So that's how we sort of like know about Howard Devoto because of that song.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there were so many questions that we've received for today. So Pretty Vacant on Twitter said, "Hi John, as someone who loved the whole punk explosion in 1976, will you touch on when you first became aware of what was going on in London, and what it was like when you first went down there? Did you go with them? Went down there with Buzzcocks?"
Yeah, I think our first trip down to London was this is through the association we built up with Malcolm McLaren, and because Pete and Howard had arranged those two gigs in Manchester for them,
Yeah.
and the truth of it is there weren't that many punk bands about then. I mean, so we were invited down to play at the Screen on the Green in Islington. There was a punk, what I think they call it the Punk Rock Special, and it was on the bank holiday weekend. I remember it was on the same weekend as the Reading Festival as well, because we bumped into some biker guys that
Oh,
were on the way to Reading, and
oh
we
right.
sort of. I thought we were going to get battered, but we sort of just chatted to them, and I think they just gave up on us as like weirdos, so, yeah, that bill was the Sex Pistols, the Clash, ourselves, and I could go on my memory. I'm not sure if maybe Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers were on the bill. So anyway, we hired a van. We went down. We pulled up outside this cinema to offload our gear, and there was already quite a biggish queue of people waiting to get in. And it just a total eye opener for me. It just looked really weird because the kind of real punky style of dressing and so on, which you hadn't really seen in Manchester there it was in front of me. These people queuing up to go into
Yeah,
the cinema. So it was like, wow, what what is going on?
yeah,
What am
because
I in?
Buzzcocks, they're regarded as punk, but you didn't dress like what we see as punk, with the Mohican and also like safety pins and so like leather or black, like black clothes. Um, but Buzzcocks were actually different. They were also like, I think you were wearing suits or something, really narrow ties and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. It was just basically charity shop time, you know. I think when Howard was in the band, because he still was at this point, of course. We're still into '76, and Howard was there
Yeah,
right up until the end of '76. Howard, I think he had more interest in the image, or he was image conscious, I should say. So he would make an effort. I think, to be honest, going down to that gig in London that I was just
in
talking about, the
London.
one in August. Yeah. Prior to that, I remember he got a photographer to come and do some pictures of us, and he turned up with like this bin liner full of like clothes that he'd put together because I think that Howard had thought that we didn't look cool, so he tried to make us, tried to spruce us up a bit. It didn't obviously didn't have too much effect, but no, we I guess we just probably look pretty much like a lot of other kids of our age from
Yeah,
Manchester at that
yeah,
time. Rather, we could bear in mind the Sex Pistols, of course. You had Malcolm McLaren and Vivian Westwood
Westwood. Yeah, yeah,
had the shop.
dressing them up.
So basically that's it. They dressed the Pistols.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah,
the Clash was also out to make a statement with the way they looked. So there was much more on the visual aspect of the bands coming from the Pistols and the Clash than there was from ourselves
yeah,
at
yeah,
that time, anyway.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna ask you now about the kit, and I've grouped them all because there's so many people as well, like sent in questions about the kit. So, like Doug McLeod said, don't forget to mention that kit. I mean, what is that
Okay.
kit?
I know what Doug's referring to there because we're both members of a group on Facebook that's about Premier drums, Premier drum fanatics, and of course I was a big, well, still am, still got my old Premier kits. Now Doug contacted me quite a few years ago. The main kit that I used in through a lot of the Buzzcocks period was a red Premier resonator, if you want the proper model name. And I ultimately ended up selling that kit to the Happy Mondays in about 1988, 89. And then, uh,
Really?
yeah, yeah. So Gaz Whelan had
Yeah,
that kit.
yeah.
Yeah, it's on one of their videos, one of those, one of their early hits. It's on there, and then I only subsequently learned that kit then went on to a couple of other bands. One's called Northside. Can't
Oh
remember
my
who it
God!
was.
Really?
Yeah, and then it was Doug who contacted me to say that the kit had been handed over to him because he does like quite a bit of drum restoration and so on. So the kit had been handed over to him to sort of, I think it had basically been neglected or it's been obviously heavily used. So
Yeah,
Doug did
yeah.
the job of trying to make the thing look pretty again. So that'll be why he's asking about that
Oh
kit.
my God!
Yeah.
So that went from Buzzcocks to Happy Mondays to Northside.
Hmm.
Absolutely amazing. It was it's so cool. I mean, I love Northside. I love Happy Mondays as well. So because those are more like my band, from
Right. Yeah.
so like
Yeah, so it's
so
got a bit of history, that kit.
yeah, yeah. So
But
Doug
it's
McLeod
still
has got
around.
it.
He
Yeah,
had it. He had it in his hands because he was posting pictures of the work that he'd done to it to bring it back to life.
yeah.
Where it is now, I don't actually know. Maybe Doug might let us know.
All right, okay. So another one is from Ian Davis. He said that you hugely influenced him after well you usually influenced me after I saw Buzzcocks playing live in the late 70s, and I've always played Premier drums ever since. Did you use Premiere from that period to record? And if so, which kits were they? Were they Elites or Resonators? I think you mentioned they were Resonators.
Yeah, that red one that Doug was mentioning, that was a resonator, and then shortly after that, I got another resonator from Premier, which was a gold sparkle. I actually wanted a red sparkle, but it turned out that Clem Burke had used up the very, because Clem Burke was a Premier player as well, from Blondie.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
he got Premier to make him one in red sparkle, which wasn't actually something that they offered in their catalogue at the time, but apparently there was they had some red sparkle left from the 60s, and he got that. And when I went and said, I want a red sparkle as well, and they said, oh, we've run out, but we have got a gold sparkle, so I got a gold sparkle one.
Oh wow.
So that was a resonator.
Yeah.
I got a 1961. I went to I actually got invited to open a drum shop in Accrington in about 1978, 79.
Yeah.
And they had this little old Premier gold sparkle drum kit in the corner. It was up for sale, 250 quid. And I bought that because it looked fantastic. And never used it on a recording, but I did use it on a Granada TV show called Fun Factory, where we are miming to Our Everything. And if that clip, that's on YouTube, and really bizarre, was like Granada TV's answer to Tiz was. So there was loads of kids in the studio, all in fancy dress. And there's parts in it where you can see. Basically, what happened was I had all my drumsticks in a bag hanging off of the floor tom. The kids helped them, basically stole all the drumsticks. And by the end of the track, you can see they're all hitting the drum kit. There's about a dozen kids around me, all bashing on the drum kit. And as the playback fades out, you can still hear the noise of the kids banging on the kit. So they're good fun.
But you were a kid yourself back then as well. You were only like 17 or 18 at the time.
That was actually quite close to the end of Buzzcocks.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That was probably about 1980, I'm guessing.
Oh, okay.
When that was done. So I'd have been all of 20 then.
Yeah. So you weren't an endorser of Premiere. You just bought Premiere kits.
Well, it was a funny setup, really. I don't exactly know how it works. I asked our manager at one point when I was really keen to play a Premiere kit because I liked the way they looked, and I asked our manager Richard Boone, would you contact the Premiere factory and see if we can sort something out, because I didn't understand how you'd see the advertising for Premiere kits and you'd see the named drummers, they'd be featured in the posters and that. I didn't know how that worked. My understanding is that they didn't actually give you the stuff for nothing, or they didn't give it me for nothing, but they did give you a very good deal on it.
Yeah.
So it made it possible to get. Oh yeah, there's a little story here because you mentioned Mike Joyce. I hope he's listening. Right. One of the things that Premier were doing at the time for the people who are endorsees, if you want to call them that. So I was included in that then. I was using, because they made their own drumsticks as well. They would actually put your name on the stick. It was printed onto the stick. So I had 200 pairs of drumsticks with John Maher on every single one of them. We used to rehearse in this place in Little Peter Street in Manchester, which it's pre-Smiths, but Mike Joyce was rehearsing in there with another band.
Is it the Hoax? Yeah.
It was either the Hoax. Was there a band called Victim as well?
Yeah, that's right. Was this in the TJM Studios?
TJM,
yeah.
That hellhole, yeah. The first time I ever met Mike Joyce would have been, I think it was 1989 when Buzzcocks did their first reunion. We were down at a hotel in London, probably the Columbia, I think. And Mike Joyce was there as well. He was rehearsing with some other band. and he took great pride in explaining to me how he had stolen a load of my John Maher drumsticks. So, yeah, I'm still waiting for him to cough up for those. So, if you're listening, Mike, you owe me.
Well, he's such a big fan. I mean, you're one, his drumming hero. So, I actually, well, speaking of Mike Joyce, I only found out they actually played in Buzzcocks as well as the drummer. He was so pleased.
Yeah, because when we reunited in 1989, it was originally pitched as just like a one-off. It was 3 weeks. I think it was 3 to 4 weeks in America and a week of gigs in the UK.
Yeah,
And what I signed up to it on that basis that yeah, I'll do this, and then that's it. We're out. But of course, as the tour progressed, halfway through, Pete, Steve, and Steve Garvey were
yeah,
saying, this is working all right. Let's
yeah,
keep this going. And but I stuck to my guns. I did that month worth of gigs, and I was out. And then of course they wanted to carry on, so they need another drummer. And I guess if anyone was going to be a logical choice, it would be Mike, because
Mike
he was,
Joyce. Yeah.
he's Manchester guy, he's big Buzzcocks fan, and so yeah, that he got that
Yeah.
job for a while.
Yeah, I read in the book they was actually really excited about it because it's such a
Yeah.
yeah. Well, going back to the question, so CG Phillips 4 on Instagram said, "Your hi hats for me is the defining sound of Buzzcocks. What drummers influenced you to have such an active approach to playing the hi hats at the time when many of your peers were just bashing away?" I mean, this is a technical.
Yeah. Well, I'll try not to get too technical, but that's kind of interesting because a couple of people over the last few years have mentioned this thing to me about the hi hats, and I'd never really given it any thought. It was just like I played the hi hat in a way that I just kind of felt fitted with the songs. But yeah, if you're digging into it a little bit deeper, a lot of drummers just treat the hi hat as one thing that really annoys me is when they just kind of keep it quite. They don't close the hi hat properly, and it's just this swashy, crashy noise. There's no distinct note to it. I like, for the most part, to keep the hi hat tightly shut so that you get that proper chick 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 chick. You can hear it. It's
Yeah,
got a
yeah,
defined sound. But the great thing about a hi hat is that because you've got that control with your foot to open it and close it, there's a huge variation in sounds. So you can go from that chick 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 to slightly opening it, and it just changes the sound, right? So there's this huge variation in sounds, and I like to take advantage of that. And in my opinion, you can operate that in such a way that it really contributes to the song, right? So,
yeah,
but it's not only like you can play the hi hat on what they call the bow, or you can strike it on the edge. So the hi hat is like, there's a whole ton of different sounds you can get from just that one piece. So I'm guessing that's what the questioner is referring
yeah,
to.
yeah.
And thinking about, I mean, I've actually gone back and I think I sussed out where I got majorly influenced on that. And at the time when I first started to play drums, this is before I hadn't even heard of punk rock really. So I was listening like, before punk rock was what was everybody that became a punk rocker listening to? They're probably too embarrassed to say they were listening to the likes of Genesis and Yes and Black Sabbath or whatever. But I'd actually gone right when I first got a drum kit. I remember one of the bands I went to see live had actually gone to the Free Trade Hall in Manchester, where we'd be playing, a couple of months later, and there was a band called the Blue Oyster Cult that I thought, well, I kind of heard a couple of things on the radio. We'll go and see them. But it was actually the support band, and it was a Dutch jazz rock group who I'd never heard of. They're called Solution. And I saw them, and they were I thought they were fantastic. In particular, the drummer. So, of course, the first Saturday after seeing that gig, I go into Manchester, and I bought the album that they'd released at the time. And the album's called Cordon Bleu. I've still got it. In fact, I was listening to it last night because doing this podcast brought it to mind. There's the opening track on that, It's an
Yeah.
instrumental called Chappaqua. And if ever anybody wanted to hear a drummer using the hi-hat in an incredibly into the way it contributes to the music, that guy Hans Waterman is the drummer. I've got to give him credit. I think he's absolutely superb, and I honestly think that the way, because I listened to that album so much at the time that, and especially tuning into what he was playing on the drums, and
Yeah.
I would probably say that it's him, seeing him play live, but hearing him on record, that contributed to me trying to do what I did with the hi hat. So
Yeah.
hopefully, if the person who asked the question wants to dig into that a bit deeper, I mean, they probably listen
What's the
to a
name?
jazz.
Yeah.
Uh,
What's the name of the band? I guess Solution.
the band's called Solution.
Solution.
Yeah, and the album that was out at the time was
Cordon Bleu.
Cordon Bleu. Yeah,
Cordon Bleu. Okay. All
yeah,
right. Well, I'll make a note of that as well. I'd
yeah,
love to listen to all these things.
yeah.
But he's also asked another question. He said, "Did your bandmates or engineers or producers ever try to discourage you from opening this hi hat? Do you open this or like opening hi
Yeah,
hat?
yeah, the way, yeah, I know what he means. But
Yeah.
no, when the way Buzzcocks worked was there wasn't anybody wielding the stick saying, no, you've got to play it like this, or don't do that, or whatever. I don't recall anything like that at all, and it just seemed to be. Probably don't get a full appreciation of how this works until later when you're working with other musicians and you can see that there is a bit more of a structure, or someone more or less kind of having more of telling people how they should play or what they should play or whatever. Whereas in Buzzcocks, it was very much just everybody left to figure out
Oh, I
what it
see.
was that would gel
Yeah.
together, and somehow, for whatever reason, it just seemed to work. So there was no, yeah, it was just left to your own devices. There was certainly
Yeah.
nobody telling me, don't do this and don't do that, which was,
Yeah.
yeah, amazing.
You're the youngest. They
Hmm.
were all like in their 20s
Yeah.
when you formed the band, right? Because when you're 16 and then someone is about 20, that's like a big gap, isn't it? Because like, you're still, were they like, did they treat you like a kid, or were they sort of like, did they see you as the same as them, like maybe as
No,
mature as them or something?
I'm sure there were plenty of times when they thought like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do with him?" Type of thing. But not at all. No, I mean, yeah, you're very much aware of the age gap when you're at that age. I mean, certainly when I first joined and Howard was in the band, because I was 16 and he was 24. You
Oh
know,
God, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pete and Steve were both 21. They're quite close, very close in age.
I see.
Um, but no, they just
So
felt like
yeah,
you'd been invited into this kind of gang, and it felt quite a protective atmosphere.
yeah, yeah. Because I've got to say, that's this is sort of like off tangent. Well, sort of like not about the kid now, but there's a photo exhibition, a John Maher photo exhibition, at Mono Cafe, and it's still on. The photos are still there. It's amazing. All these photos from your tour in America. There's one particular photo that I really like. It's four of you, and you can tell that you're very young because you're holding a nice lolly. It's almost like this young kid having a nice lolly, and all the others are like band members are just sort of like standing there and sort of like having their photo taken. So I just thought, wow, so young. You're such a young kid with all these old people or mature, so like band members. But anyways, before we're gonna continue with the questionnaire, but Stuart Kerr, he's the drummer of Friends Again. I love Stuart Kerr. He said that you're such an amazing drummer and was always blown away by how fast you could play. So yeah, he's brilliant, Stuart Kerr. But so going back to the kids, Gordon Baxter said, "Do you ever miss playing the drums? I know you did some work with Penetration not so long back, so I assume you've still got the kit." that's a drum kit there behind you, isn't it? So it's like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah. That's a Premier drum kit, and it's actually converted to electronic. It
okay.
I know somebody asked a question about electric drum kit, so I'll probably touch on that a bit
Yeah,
more.
I'm gonna.
But
That's the next question. Actually, I'm gonna
yeah,
ask you that one.
okay.
So, but do you miss playing the drums?
Well, I still play. I mean, I'll probably be playing later today. This is the fantastic thing with having the kit there in the house.
Yeah.
So yeah, but although the last recording I did was, as he mentioned in the question, was with Penetration. I think that was back in about 2015. That was on yeah, another Red Premier resonator kit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a really good experience. But yeah, I still play. I think it's good to keep your hand in. I think it's a good thing for your coordination, and
Yeah. Yeah. Of
yeah, it's
course.
just something. Sometimes you just feel like you've got to go and have a blast behind the drum kit.
Yeah.
Still have that
When
need.
was the last time you were on stage? So like playing the drum.
Last time I played on stage, um, that must have been at the Royal Albert Hall. The with
Oh,
Buzzcocks,
for
which
yeah,
which was
for
basically a
Pete
Pete Shelley
Shelley.
Memorial
Yeah.
show. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. And so you haven't been to like, you haven't joined any band after that. That was just the last time.
No,
Well, yeah.
there was because there's a lot of musicians up here on the island, in Lewis and Harris, because you mentioned the population of Harris is less than 2,000, but Harris itself is physically connected to Lewis. So if you go up to the capital of Lewis, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
Stornoway, from here is about 50 miles away. So you've got an overall population, Lewis and Harris, of probably something approaching, I don't know, 18, 20,000, something like that. There's a lot more people in Lewis, and there's a significant proportion of musicians and that. Now they have for many years now have an annual what they call classic rock night, and basically get together and they do cover versions of classic rock songs. And
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
can't remember what year it was. It might have been 2019 as well, I think. And they decided that they were going to include Ever Fallen in Love in the set. So they contacted me and said, "Do you fancy coming and
But
playing for
yeah.
that?"
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, yeah, okay." I thought, oh, it might be a bit cheesy, sort of thing, but I thought I'll agree to do it, and it was really good fun, and a fantastic bunch as well. Really,
Yeah.
really good bunch of musicians, and
Yeah.
it was, yeah, fab to get the invite to do it.
So you have like live music venues where you are. I mean, there are
Oh
sort of
yeah,
like gigs being,
yeah, we don't all live in caves.
No, sorry, like I said, I mean, it's beautiful. I have seen the photos. It's a
Yeah,
beautiful
yeah,
place,
yeah.
but it's not Manchester where every
No, it's
night
not
there.
Manchester, but there are things going on here that
Right. Okay. This question, it's quite long actually, so I cut it and so like I can read it properly. So it's from Crew Living. I think that's how he says 66. It's from Instagram. And
yeah.
he said, I'm building a house up in Lewis, because you mentioned Lewis as well. And I'm looking to get myself a drum kit, as I've heard it can be excellent neurological therapy. Space will be an issue. So, looking at an electronic kit. So, what are your thoughts on electronic kits versus acoustic when space is limited?
Yeah, they're perfect for that because they take up far less space. I did end up buying one, a relatively cheap one. In fact, it was just before we did the Royal Albert Hall show in 2019. I thought, well, I need to get up to speed and get a bit of practice in. And if you've got something at home, it's easier to do and whatever. Uh, the frustration that I did have with the electronic gear was, first of all, I don't like how they look, but that doesn't matter if you're just playing at home and you just want to sort of practice. but also some of the cheaper ones, the sounds are not. You got to bear in mind, I'm coming from a background of having played and been brought up and playing on a real drum kit. So the goal for me is like, if you're going to play an electronic one, I want it to simulate as close as possible to sounding and feeling like a real one, because then it just is, the experience for me is more enjoyable. But if you just want to learn the rudiments and you want to get work out the basic rhythms and all that, and you're not maybe you haven't even ever played a real acoustic, what you call acoustic drum kit before, that's absolutely fine. You're still going to learn an awful lot. But the one thing that took me a while to get figured out with my electronic kit, which I've totally sussed out now, is that on the more basic kits, going back to this hi-hat, it relates to the hi-hat question that we talked about earlier, is that a lot of the electronic hi-hats, they just have two sounds. It's either closed and you're hitting it, it's got a closed sound, or it's open and you get a splashy sound. It doesn't have all the transition stuff that goes on in between. Now if you're just playing sort of, if it was kind of like a dance music thing and you're trying to sound like a drum machine, that's fine, that's not a problem. But if you're trying to be a little bit more expressive and so on, that might get you wound up a bit and get you frustrated with it. It's possible to do electronically, and I have done it myself. I've got a hi-hat that responds just, an electronic hi-hat that responds just like the real thing now. But no, if you want to, you've never played drums before and you want to get cracking and you haven't got much room in your house, even a fairly cheap electronic kit, go for it.
Yeah. Did you do some modification in your sort of electronic? Because you're very good at these things. You sort of like change them to make it sound the way you want it to sound.
Yeah, I ended up buying a. Yeah, you weren't going to delve into too much technical nonsense. Rather than buying an off-the-shelf drum module that's got inbuilt sounds, I bought a thing that converts the hit of the drum into something that triggers actual real drum samples. So when I sit behind my kit and I've got it all connected in, when I hit that snare drum, it's actually triggering a snare drum that was recorded in Hansa Studios in Berlin on a amazing quality drum kit that's been mic'd up, and all the levels and everything have been set by a professional producer engineer. So I can literally sit behind that thing, put the headphones on, and it sounds like the best drum kit that's been tuned by someone who absolutely knows how to set everything up perfectly. So that's the kind of level that you can get to with electronic drum kits now, which that was something that never even existed back in Buzzcocks days.
Yeah. Well, Alex McDonald, he said, thanks for the answer on electronic drum kits, John. Much appreciated. Hope you've got a sunny day in Harris today. So that's him who asked you the question. Cool. And I just want to say, sorry, Stuart Kerr. So Stuart Kerr played with Friends Again, Love and Money, The Bathers, Texas, and Gone. So I'm really glad. So he's been in all those bands. Before I actually go to another batch of questions for you, there's so many messages that I've received for you, because one of them, I'm just going to read them all through. Jess Gibbons said that he's a big fan of Buzzcocks, and he's got everything from Spiral Scratch through to Pete Shelley's solo, more electro stuff. And he said that every Buzzcocks single was perfect combination of fast, angry music with amazing pop melodies and harmonies. So that's from Jess. Pete Hurst, he said that it's excellent that you said yes to Ask the Drummer. Yeah, it is definitely excellent. Thank you so much that you agreed to do this. Sean Charman, who's a drummer, he was a drummer of the wedding, in the Wedding Present, the early days of the Wedding Present. He says, you're a genuine legend. Aliyah Zainab, she said, I didn't know this, but she said that you used to run a speedway. And she thought that was really funny, because given that you have a song called I Hate Fast Cars. So I was like, is that right? You had a speedway? You run a...
Well, no, I used to race. I had a couple of Volkswagens. I got it right. Well, actually, during my time in Buzzcocks, I got into Volkswagens. First bit of money we got from Spiral Scratch, I purchased a Volkswagen Beetle. And
Oh,
then when Buzzcocks finished, sort of around the mid 80s, I got into, well, I basically sort of dropped the music business, needed to do something
yeah,
else, and I got into repairing the old air-cooled VWs, and that gradually transformed into building high-performance engines, going to the racetrack and racing them, and then ultimately building race engines for other Volkswagen owners. And it's something I
yeah.
still do to this day. So that's where the contradiction with I hate fast cars comes in, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, somebody asked about that. Whether like he remembered you as owning a repair shop, a Volkswagen repair shop in Old Trafford. They said so yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
had
that
that one.
was
Yeah.
just round the back of my parents' house there on Mill Street. Yeah.
Oh right, okay. So more messages. So Noel Puncher, he's a Filipino, in living in Manila, and again he confirmed that only very few Filipino punks knew about Buzzcocks, and he said that the only reason for that is from the punk compilation tapes, cassette tapes, and records that they were sent to them overseas. Because when we were teenagers, we didn't really know about Buzzcocks at all. So it's only a few Filipino punks who did. And then Leslie, Leslie Shimon said that Buzzcocks not only prevented punk being a purely London phenomenon, the Spiral Scratch EP pretty much created indie music. So Buzzcocks were arguably more important than Sex Pistols, The Clash, and all those punk bands. David Chambers, who's a drummer in he said that you're one of his drumming heroes. Ian White is in the Wendy's, a Scottish band. He said that he loves your photos of the Outer Hebrides. So that's good as well. Chris Goodwin, he's in a band with you, and so like flag of convenience. Is it a flag of convenience? It's called, yeah. But
Mhm.
he said that what a drummer, because Chris Goodwin is also a drummer in the
Right.
High and other bands.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Renwick, yeah, Renwick Pascual, who's Filipino living in New York now, he said that how I wish you were still drumming for Buzzcocks. And he said that he loved your excellent work with Pauline Murray. And that would be the penetration, isn't it? The one with Pauline Murray.
Yeah, well, penetration, but also back in while I was still in Buzzcocks, I think just about. I did an album with Pauline Murray when penetration had split, and she did a project called Pauline Murray and the Invisible Girls.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
an
That's
album
what.
there.
Okay. Um, John McGlone, who's in Western Promise, in a Liverpool band, he said that you're a fantastic drummer and top fella. James Hannington, who's the drummer of Daniel Takes a Train, he said that he loves your playing. And Dixie, and this is the last one now, Dixie Ernell, he worked in insurance brokers before, and you were his client. And he, and he said that you were a really nice person to deal with. So that's like all those questions.
That's weird.
So yeah. So right. So let's go back now to all the other questions that were sent in, and this one is about the songs now and your performances. Chris Gay wanted to know what Buzzcock song did you most enjoy playing live and why?
Um, I probably I always go for Why Can't I Touch It because I just like it's not a typical Buzzcock song. It's just got a great groove to it. Very influenced for me by Jackie Liebersee from Can. You know, thought he's an amazing drummer. So the opportunity came along to finally incorporate something more along those sort of Jackie Liebersee line than you couldn't force a typical Can groove into a lot of Buzzcock songs, but that Can played a part for me in influencing
Yeah.
what I play on that track. Yeah.
Wow, that's actually my most favorite Buzzcock song. I can't get enough of that song. Why can't I touch it? And Ronnie Walker Dunn from on Twitter, he said that, did you record the drums on Why Can I Touch It in one take or multiple takes?
That it was all one take. It was quite funny, really, because what we've done is we've gone into Strawberry Studios in Manchester to record our next single, which was Everybody's Happy
Everybody's,
Nowadays.
yeah, yeah,
So we
yeah.
recorded that, and then, if my memory is right, what we did once we'd got that down, we went out with Strawberry Studios in Stockport, obviously, and it was a Sunday, if I remember rightly. It was a Sunday because everywhere was shut. We were looking for a restaurant, and we'd go for a meal. And when we had the meal, we would go back and put down the B side, which we hadn't even really properly fully worked out, but we had this idea for Why Can't I Touch It. So we went out. The only restaurant we could find was a Greek restaurant, and we went in there, and there was lots of ouzo, and retsina was consumed. So we were kind of a little bit tipsy when we got back to the studio. So I do believe that, that sort of what the ouzo and the retsina brought about contributed to the sort of maybe slightly drifting around vibe that you've got on Why Can't I Touch It.
Oh wow! Because I mean, I've got that record. They actually asked you to sign that one, and I thought, why is it a B side? But it actually says it's a double A side, so it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, instead of because that's just absolutely amazing. It's yeah, it is my favorite song. I mean, Ever Fallen in Love, of course, is a classic. It's a classic Buzzcocks. But Why Can I Touch It is just amazing, superb. It's like just really, really good. But another question from Xander Young: what was the inspiration on the main riff part in Ever Fallen in Love prior to the chorus? Because he said that to me it's a really iconic part of the drums in the song, and he also said, "I hope you're keeping well, John." So, what
yeah.
was the inspiration?
Well, firstly, I know Xander. Xander is from Harris, I believe.
Oh,
He
right.
I did some photographs of a band he was in years and years ago. So yeah, fellow drummer, hello Xander. I know what he's talking about. There's a little just after the vocal stops in the verse of Ever Fallen in Love, and then it's like that, the little guitar, that sort of thing. Well, I thought the drums need to do something to sort of go along with that little guitar riffy thing, and I was sort of trying various things, and I couldn't. That doesn't. Nothing was sounding quite right, and I eventually stumbled across a tom-tom pattern playing across with the snare. That it did. I believe it fits in with the guitar riff, and it does. It complements that as well. So it's almost like a drum riff as well as you've got the guitar riff, and then you've got this little drum riff going on at the same
Yeah.
time. And weirdly enough, again, I'm going to go back to I mentioned Solution earlier. Well,
Yeah.
when I sort of discovered Solution, of course, that back in those days, you discover a band and you buy an album, and then only later to discover that, oh, wow, they've done two more before this. So of course, I worked my way backwards, and they're on Solution's very first album. There's a track that I could play it to you and say this is what sort of inspired me to come up with that little drum riff in Ever Fall in Love, but I don't. A lot of people wouldn't make the connection because it isn't the same. It's just that somehow the way he was playing this particular part in a song, it clicked
Yeah.
in my head, and I thought, wow, that's so. It was that came into my head when Pete was playing the song, and I thought, all right, I've got to find not that what that guy's playing won't work, but something along those lines. So it was again the influence of Hans Watermeter Solution played a part in inspiring me to stick something
Yeah.
into Ever Fall in Love that otherwise wouldn't have been there.
Do you call it a drum riff? Is it a riff as well for drums, or do you call it
I don't
something?
know if there's not such a thing as a drum riff, there is now. Xander will know what I mean.
Oh,
And
right.
no doubt all the other drummers that are tuned in will know what I mean as well, I hope.
Yeah. Well, Stuart Kerr, he's a drummer. He said that that is so cool, that part that he's talking about, that you're talking about. So yeah, he understands.
Yeah.
I always sort of like think that. I mean, it's like, is it also a riff when it's a drum part? Because you know the guitar riffs and things.
Well, you know, us drummers have to have our own language so we can.
Yeah. Right, Ronnie Dapp. He said, "What's your personal favorite Buzzcocks track and LP?"
Well, I guess I answered that before with why can't I
Was
touch
it?
it?
Yeah,
I'll
what
say
so,
that
yeah,
LP. I don't know. I think there's different tracks or different albums that stand out. You know, different kind of tension as a whole. I wouldn't say it was my favorite album, but it's certainly got some of my favorite. You know, Halloween. I like Halloween Side. I guess if I had to pick a whole album, the one I really quite fond of is Time's Up, which was originally not recorded as an album at all. It was just like the first time we ever went into a studio, and
oh, okay.
it got released as a bootleg initially, and then finally got an official release, and that was when Howard was still in the band, and admit, you know, Howard's voice on there does sound pretty much like he's copying Johnny Rotten, so maybe that's not
Oh,
so great. But I think purely because it's the first time we went in, we
yeah,
recorded the thing pretty well. Basically, it was a live recording, and it's got a couple of guitar overdubs on it. There's quite a few mistakes on it. Most of them probably from me, but the energy of it, and it was, you know, the first time I've having gone into a studio. I guess when I listen back to that, that's what is, you know, been triggered in my mind. That's probably why I like it so much. So I think I very rarely play it, but on the odd occasion that I do, you know, if I dig it out,
yeah,
I listen to it. It often strikes me as like, wow, you know, it just sounds so. Just the energy that was there, like the
yeah,
four youngsters first time in a studio. I think it does convey. It's captured something there.
yeah. Well, Joe McKechnie, also a drummer, he's been in loads of bands. Joe McKechnie, he's saying that any good stories about working with Martin Rushent and what he brought to recording drums.
Right, Martin, fantastic producer. I don't think I appreciated. Well, I know I didn't appreciate at the time we were recording with him how good he was, until you sort of then go work with other people. And I think that one of the amazing things about Martin, and this is probably true of all really well-regarded producers, not only the technical ability, but the way that he communicates with the band. Because, like, when you're in the studio, I think this is probably true of most youngish bands. You know that everybody's looking to, like, can you turn the bass drum and the snare drum up a bit? Because I'm there listening to what my bits and not really probably giving much heed to everything else. The
Oh,
minute
okay,
I,
yeah,
the minute I think a guitar is now drowning out something that I've just done, it's like I want to get that back, you know. Martin's like they're having to deal with this from all sides, and still managing to churn out that amazing sound that he did on those the three main albums. Well, mainly all the output, 76 to, you know, when the band split.
yeah.
Um, yeah, he was a great guy to work with.
Right. Stuart Barstow, he said, which performance on record are you most proud of?
Um,
Like,
I,
okay.
the only one sometimes when I listen to it, there's so I can't tell you a specific track because I don't listen back to them that much, but I do feel that because Love Bites was recorded so quickly after the first album, the newer songs that we hadn't been playing live, that kind of really only got worked out when Love Bites was being recorded. I can see that I had a tendency to too busy. Really, I sometimes will listen to certain tracks on that. I think,
Yeah,
you're just doing too much. You're just doing too much trying to. Because I remember, I know that, like, when because what was it? It was like Love Bites recorded 9 months after, came out 9 months after Another Music in a Different Kitchen. It's just ridiculous to,
Okay.
cram it out that quick.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
once the songs had been committed, recorded, but then you're out. We talked because we were touring quite a lot in those days, and they would often get a cassette tape taken off the desk from the gig the night before. We'd be driving to the next venue, and always made a point of listening back to the previous night's performance. And it's not until you actually hear it back on the tape that you realise, need to tone that down a bit or whatever. So basically, what happens is
Oh,
the more you played the songs, the kind of
yeah.
the arrangement and what you played would settle down, and you'd get to a point where now that sound. I wish we'd recorded this version of what I'm playing on it than the one with. Not that this. I don't think there's anything too horrendously wrong, but that you look at something like Another Music. Those are songs that we've been, as is typical of any band's first album. You're recording the songs that you've been playing for quite some time, so they've all kind of
Yeah.
settled
Yeah.
down and you've got it all figured out. But when you're rushed into recording new stuff,
The second, yeah.
sometimes what you've initially put down, you may sort of wish that you'd had a chance to look back on it a bit more.
Yeah. Well, Joe Ree, he said, what ranks as your favorite Buzzcocks gig you ever played?
Oh, wow. I don't know really. That was a weird thing that, you certainly when you're on some of these tours that were like a month long, 30 dates, one night after the other, and you would range from something the size of Manchester Apollo to a small club. And I remember sometimes you'd turn up at, I think the one that was seen the most ridiculous was a club in Swindon called the Affair. I think it probably around 77 that we played that. We turned up, it's
Yeah.
absolutely tiny, and I just thought, oh, this is awful. But actually, when we went on stage and played, for some reason, it was probably one of the most enjoyable gigs on the tour because, for what reason, I don't know. And
The
also,
audience reception, maybe
well,
also.
maybe it just sounded great on stage. Maybe just everybody was like clicking together more
Yeah.
than they might have done the night before. I don't know what the reason is, but often I don't think you could ever tell. You could never tell in advance whether you were going to enjoy that night's gig as much as the one before. And sometimes it was the really odd little places that came as like a really pleasant surprise and really
Yeah.
enjoyable, despite the fact, you thought you should have been on a much bigger stage and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, honestly, I can't think of one specific gig that was better, but I probably would say that I had a tendency to enjoy the smaller venues more than the large ones. Like,
The big one, yeah.
I think the biggest one we ever did was the outdoor show at Alexandra Park, which was opposite my school. It's one that Paul Hanley mentioned when we were. I think it was the first time he saw us play live. Well, it's fantastic playing in front of 40,000 people or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as an experience personally, did you enjoy that as much as playing, the little tiny club in
Small.
Swindon? Probably not. No.
Right. These are more the technical ones now. I mean, I know that we've asked you some technical questions before, but this one from Ian Yolton. Could I please ask how the drum track for "Late for the Train" on the Love Bites album was recorded? I assume it's some sort of tape loop. Is
Right. Okay. Yeah, the first time we recorded that was for a John Peel session. That's when I think over the years we probably did. I think sure we did at least 3 Peel sessions, and you generally do 4 songs, and we tended to do 3 of the songs were ones we knew inside out, and we'd do those, and then for the 4th one, because you were in this studio, it was almost like free studio time. Let's experiment a bit. And late for the train was one of them. I think Pete had the idea of the song, and we never played it live. And I just had this idea that because we're in the studio, you had this rhythm of like, so I thought I like to play three on the bass drum, three on the snare drum, repeat ad infinitum. Physically, to play it on a drum kit, it's like I could do it, but not for the whole length of the song. Just physically could not keep it going for more than nowhere near the length of the song, nowhere near, fall apart.
Yeah.
But we're in the studio and we had these like BBC engineers and that, and I said, well, what I'd like it to sound like is, you know, but I can't play that for 5 minutes. Can you do something like? Can you put? What they did was I said, could you do like a double echo? I'll hit the bass drum once, and then I want two echoes, so it's, you know, a real hit and then two echoes behind it. Same on the snare. So they faffed around and got it sorted out. So all I had to do was boom, donk, boom, donk, and keep in time with the echoes. So
Oh,
if you dig out the John Peel version of Late for the Train, you'll hear that it kind of does. I more or less follow that, but sometimes it goes a bit wonky. So then, when we went to record Love Bites, we wanted to put that track on the album, but we wanted to do it better than the way we'd done it for the John Peel session.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is where the tape loop came in. So what actually happened was, rather than getting the double echo thing involved, I said to the engineer, who, as it happens, Doug Bennett, who engineered on that Slade album, my first ever Slade album.
Oh, right.
So I've now got the opportunity to ask a guy who I knew was had been my favourite band's album. Can you do this? And I said, I can actually play the drum pattern that I want to do, but I can't play it for very long because I just fall to bits. He says, right, we'll record you and play it for as long as you can, and we'll take the most in time bit. And he transferred it onto 1/4-inch tape, and then I was watching him in the control room do this. It was fascinating. He was whizzing the tape back and forth to find where to make the cut, splicing it together, and then it's just, yeah, it is actually a tape loop. But what you're hearing on the loop is me. I did play it, and then we overdubbed cymbal smashes and stuff. They were overdubbed onto it later. So yeah, thanks to Doug Bennett, former Slade and Buzzcocks engineer, for sorting that one out for me.
It's fascinating. Thanks, so good. Right, Joe Cook, he said, can you tell us about the drum pattern on Moving Away from the Pulse Beat and how you recorded it, please? And he said, when you were preparing and arranging Buzzcock songs, did you have a free hand in the drumming, timing, beat, etc.?
Yeah. Well, as far as arrangement goes, like I mentioned earlier, yeah, there was no. It was just, can you come up with a drum part for this? And you did, and yeah, that was it. You know.
Yeah.
As for the drum beat itself, it was Pete played as this guitar thing that he got for Pulse Beat, and to me, it instantly sounded like Bo Diddley, and I loved that dun 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 dun, you know, that kind of the Bo Diddley beat, if you like. And so I came up with something that fitted that, but I didn't want to literally play that just exactly the same thing right throughout the song. So what I did was, I made, effectively, there's like 4 little variations on it, and each one progressively has a little bit more snare drum thrown into it. And the drummer listeners, the ones who have sort of learned to play along to that, they'll know what that is. It gradually gets a little bit more busier on the snare, and then once it's done that pattern of 4, it drops back and does the same thing again. It's pretty much that. There's a little variations here and there, and then what everybody was sort of criticized. Don't know if they were criticized. Some people would criticize, say it's first ever punk rock drum solo. It's actually, if we want to be technical, it's not a drum solo. It's all it means is that everybody else stopped playing, and I just carried on doing exactly what I was doing right throughout the whole thing. So it's a drum break, not a drum solo. But that's pedantic.
But you said Bo Diddley beat. Is that the D beat? That's because Mark Reynolds said discuss the D beat and if you feel
Oh, right.
responsible for inventing the popular punk drum beat used by Discharge and many others. And he said, "You Turn Me Up," which is a Buzzcocks, the Buzzcocks who did
Yeah.
it first. So is that the D beat? He
DB,
said.
yeah, right, okay, yeah. Before I go into that, I will say, because just back on Pulse Beat, the drums are actually double tracked on that. Because I remember when I recorded the drums, we went back into the control room to listen to it back, and Martin Russian suggested, was looking at ways of sort of thickening it up or whatever. And I says, well, just double track it, just do it again. And so, well, can you do that? Because it varies throughout. So I had I got a notepad, well, A4 foolscap pad, and listened to it back to make sure that I had a little code for, the the first bar is this, and so I was able to literally just double track on top of that. So there you go. That's why it's kind of got that quite a chunky sound to it. 'Cause it's double drum. It's played twice. It's not sort of got loads of effects on it. But this D beat thing, yeah, that's weird. I did some recording back with I was in a band, sort of in a band back in like 1980 called The Things, Manchester
Oh
band,
yeah, yeah.
psychedelic thing. Right, bass player in that band, Joe, he got in touch with me. God, it must be about 8, 9 years ago. And he said, "Have you seen this discussion going on the internet about D beat and who invented it?" And I said, "No, what the hell is D beat?" And he said, "Well, apparently you invented it." So I had to, I went on and I saw this talk about Discharge using this D beat. But basically, all it is it's a drum beat that goes dun, 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 dun. Right, and there's actually I ended up seeing this video of a guy from a band called the Barukas who was claiming he invented the D beat in 1980, ignoring the fact that we'd actually recorded "You Tear Me Up" in 1976, which apparently is the same beat. And then they get into this whole thing. Well, it's got to be played on the right cymbal, and inventing all these rules around what it is. And I think I might have replied to them at the time. I said, I wouldn't claim that I invented anything. I mean, how long have drums been around on the planet? But then for someone to claim that it has to be done in such a way, and there's all these rules, it's like I think the minute you start saying it doesn't comply with the rules, so it's not this and it's not that, you've lost the argument, really. But the thing is, yes, a lot of people do point at "You Tear Me Up" as being
The
the
first
original
one. Yeah.
DB. Yeah.
The
So
first one.
if you want to take that, fine. If you don't, that's fine too.
Oh right. Oh right, that's interesting. That's something that I really need to look up as well. That DB. So I didn't know about that. But going back to that, moving away from the post, because there's another question. I should have grouped them together. Um, Peter Flanagan said, "What were you listening to when you came up with the drum patterns for moving away from the post?"
Well, I around that time I had sort of musically you're into stuff that was contemporary, but I'd also got into things like the Shangri-La and the Ronettes, Eddie Cochran.
Oh
This is sort of late 50s, early 60s sort of stuff.
yeah.
I still do like that kind of music. And also, in along with that, I'd bought a Bo Diddley album, and it predominantly is that kind of beat. So just the instant that Pete was playing that kind of rhythm on the guitar, I thought that's got to have like a Bo Diddley beat. But of course, when you think that, you put a version in that it's got to fit with the song. So maybe it changes and mutates a little bit, becomes a little bit of its own thing. Because I've also seen a lot of people over the years refer to the drum pattern or the rhythm of pulse beat as been
Yeah, yeah.
African influenced. Maybe a bit along the lines of like Bow Wow Wow or whatever. But it was just literally a case of, I think this will fit with what Pete's doing and what the others were doing, and I made my little variations on it to make it, something a bit more interesting to play and hopefully sound a bit more interesting as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, predominantly, the very first reaction on hearing what Pete was playing was, "We've got to do something along the lines of Bo Diddley for this."
Oh, well, Peter Flanagan also said that you were definitely his influences at the age of 13, and plenty of other young drummers who went on to be very successful. Mike Joyce, he said, is being a prime example, who I used to watch limbering up to Pulse Beat in my local scout hut. So Mike Joyce was probably copying you or something. Right, well, another question is from Steve Densdale. He said, "What do you think of click tracks? Have you ever used them?" Because for me, one of the magic aspects of classic Buzzcocks is the way that the band accelerates together, he said, giving an urgency and intensity which is so important to the spirit of the music. So click tracks. So,
Yeah, I don't think Buzzcocks ever used a click track. Um, I've played to click tracks before. It's usually I think we did some click track stuff on the Penetration album that I did in 2015, and it's usually because maybe there's something else about it. If there's a sequenced part in the track, you kind of everybody has to stay on time, or it all goes to shit. But in the main, I think it's I, I can't I can't think of any particular tracks that we did do with Click. But certainly very much in Buzzcocks days. That was like, I remember the first time somebody suggested, like, can you play along to a Click? It was an absolute nightmare. Couldn't
okay.
couldn't stay with it, and you're concentrating so hard on like trying to stay with it that it puts you off. You lose that fluidity, I guess. Um, so I think really if the music suits it, if you haven't got playing to some synth is set up with a sequence that's absolutely right, it's very obviously you've got no choice. Then you do need to play to a click, but
Yeah.
otherwise, if it's just like two guitars, bass, and drums, just go with the flow. And no doubt, if you wanted to listen to a Buzzcocks track and you had a click counter there working away, you're going to find there's going to be bits where it speeds up and slows down, no doubt. But that's the way it goes.
Okay. Stuart Kerr's got a question for you. He said he'd like to know what music do you listen to nowadays, and who are your favorite drummers and bands?
Oh, nowadays, to be honest, mostly just leave stuff DMB radio streaming all day long. Drum and bass. Of course, a lot of that won't be actual real drums either.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but
Do you have
I
any
don't.
favorite band? So, like current band? Or...
Well, all right. The album that I've listened to most of late is Nia Archives album. I can't even tell you what the name of it is. Fairly young girl. It's kind of pretty drum and bass influence, but she was just on the Jules Holland show last week with a young
Oh,
band. It was great to see these young folk. Drummer, tiny bass drum and a snare drum and a hi hat. I think that's all he had, and it's just great to see a human playing, sort of drum and bass type rhythms. Really, um, I don't have. Uh, don't know. I say I'll just leave DMB radio streaming all day, and I
yeah.
haven't got a list of bands to pull out of the hat for you, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, I've got this. He's actually got loads of questions for you. It's Lou Keeble on Twitter or X. I should say X. I should stop saying Twitter because it's not
No,
Twitter
don't say
anymore.
X.
Yeah.
Don't say
Okay, so Lou Keeble, these are loads. Like, what was your process for learning the drums? And how did you get that good at such a young age?
I think the probably the best thing that could have happened really is that very when I joined Buzzcocks, I had only been playing like 5 or 6 weeks, and I would say I had the very basics sort of figured out. Um, but rather than being left to sort of try and learn to play in a room on your own, I got the opportunity to join a band, and you were with other musicians, and they just start playing a song, and it is equated to being like a 6-month-old baby being dropped into a swimming pool. You sink or swim, and I had no option. I just had to sort of try
You
and
learn, yeah.
do it, and it is a baptism of fire. But I don't, I doubt there's a better way to learn. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
dive in and go for it.
Yeah, it reminds me of my guest last week. He also said the same thing. You can be the best or like drummer at home practicing
Yeah,
all the time, but you've
yeah.
got to be with other musicians, so you've got to sort of like learn, to be
I
able
think
to
that's the
play.
that's the key. Yeah, I think like drums are meant to be. They're meant to accompany other musicians, other instruments, and
Yeah.
what happens when you play on your own is you end up. Well, let's say, for example, Charlie Watts would be playing to a Stones tune, and it's actually, if you just isolate the drums, it's just a really simple, basic groove. It might not actually change very much at all. So if you're listening to it on its own, it's like, yeah, okay, it's just some guy going boom. But then you bring in all the other instruments, and it just sounds absolutely fantastic because he's playing what fits the music. So
Yeah,
yeah, if you want to learn, I think you just got to get together with other musicians and
the
play along with them.
musicians.
Because if you're left to your own devices, you just disappear up your own backside.
Well, continuing his question, he said, "How? Sorry, were you affected by nerves and stage fright when you were performing? And if so, how did you overcome that?"
Yeah, that's a weird one because I remember doing. I played guitar on the. It was a school concert. This when I was about 15, and because I was, we actually played an instrumental that, believe it or not, Black Sabbath. There's a track on one of the Black Sabbath albums called Fluff, which is not a heavy metal track at all. It's almost like quite a soft instrumental type thing, and there's a harpsichord in it and a nylon strung guitar. I got the guitar part, and at that school concert, I was absolutely like, I was literally trembling. I was so nervous. So when it came time to go on stage with Buzzcocks, because that was my only experience of having performed in front of people before, I thought I'm going to be exactly the same. I'm going to be trembling, all this.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when we went on stage at the Lesser Free Trade Hall, absolutely not at all. And I can only think it was because I was like, I was with my gang, and it was like this attitude of like, you're just going on, and we're just going to do this. And it was really weird. So there was no nerves associated with that at
All
all.
right. So you never felt like any stage fright at all when you're
No,
performing,
no,
no? Oh, that's
no.
brilliant.
It's because I had my
Well,
gang.
yeah, yeah. Did drumming cause any trouble with your hearing? With so I know
Yeah,
that
probably.
quite a lot of drummers have tinnitus and things. So
Yeah, I don't have tinnitus fortunately, but I think it's definitely it's not necessarily the actual drumming itself. It's the being on stage. Back in the days when people used on, certainly on the bigger stages, the two wedge monitors right by the side there, and because the noise on stage was so much, this would be cranked up to some mental level. So it'd be like well into the next day before the buzzing in your ears had subsided. So I guess the cumulative effect of that. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so I think it's fair to say there's a bit of hearing loss gone on, but nothing too drastic, I don't
Not
think.
too. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's good to know that. And his last question was, what caused you to switch careers?
Right, so obviously Buzzcocks split up. After that, I did do a few sort of freelance drumming things. I rattle off a few. Did a tour with Wah, some stuff with the Lotus Eaters. because I
Oh, really?
did a bit with some Liverpool bands. Yeah, I got into the Liverpool
Whoa.
thing for a while. There was a band called Hamby and the Dance.
Oh, yeah.
Did
Yeah.
some stuff with them. And then this, I don't know. I think I just felt going from being in like a proper band where it was a very close knit thing that you were very much part of because you were there from the beginning.
Yeah.
Then going into this thing of basically being a hired drummer, and you didn't have that it wasn't the same feeling as being part of a band, you know. And I think ultimately the realization that if you genuinely wanted this to become a full-time career, we'd probably have to go down to London to find enough work, and I wasn't prepared to do that. So my interest in Volkswagens was, you know, as my sort of interest in music was declining, my interest in Volkswagens was on the increase. So it just came right. I basically dumped music. I kind of dropped out of it for quite some time.
Yeah.
In the 80s, you know, we had the rise of the new romantic movement and stuff, and I don't know whether I have a dislike for that because you know, it replaced what I'd been a part of, or I was telling myself at the time I didn't like it because it was dreadful. So I think there's a mix of both in there because some of it was absolutely dreadful, but you know, it
That
just
was actually sort of like our generation, that new romantic
well,
sort of like
you
music
know,
kind of
it's got to be somebody's generation, but it wasn't mine.
thing. Joe McKechnie said Buzzcocks did a lot to help other groups, taking Joy Division and Subway Sect on tour, paying for the Fall to do some of their first studio recordings. Any memories about that period? Yeah. All for one ethos, he said.
Yeah, I suppose it because it was all new to us as well. So this thing of the thing of taking other bands from Manchester or bands we liked out on the road to give them an opportunity, that was pretty much down to Richard, our manager, Richard Boone. He was very pro to do that. So I guess from my point of view, I didn't play a part in any of the organisation of who came on tour with us or anything like that. So it was okay. The Fall are coming down to London with us for this show, and then you know John Cooper Clarke. I think Buzzcocks gave him his opportunity to do his poetry in front of punk rock audiences, which was pretty weird at the time. But I guess it was an era where pretty much anything goes, you know. So
Yeah.
we had Richard had the opportunity to get these other people. And if you're going to do a tour, why not bring a band around with you that you actually like, you know? So yeah, one of those early tours was with Subway Sect.
Yeah.
We met the Slits through them supporting the Clash and ourselves. So they did some support shows with us. So yeah, it was all exciting times, especially for a youngster like myself.
Yeah. Well, this is I'm going to ask you a question which is actually kind of personal for me because I mentioned my husband, Aidan O'Rourke. He was in a band called The Sinners in Dublin. And I don't know if you remember it, but Buzzcocks played in Dublin in 1979. And the support was Aidan's band, The Sinners.
Oh wow!
And apparently they beat U2 to it. U2 wanted to be the support for Buzzcocks, but The
I didn't
Sinners
know
got
that.
the
Right.
sinners got the slot.
Good.
And
Good.
and I was so like, but after hearing you talk about it was Richard Boone who's actually, you know, so like responsible for having all these Manchester bands, I said to my husband, maybe that's why it is, because Aidan interviewed Pete Shelley because he's a massive fan of Buzzcocks. He interviewed Pete Shelley at the time, and I think Richard Boone was there. So I was saying to him, maybe Richard Boone remembered you, so like from Manchester, and that's why you got the part instead of you two. But it was like, so do you remember any of that Dublin? So like playing in Dublin in 1979?
I don't remember the gig. I remember being there, Because I remember myself and Steve Diggle were sharing a hotel room, and we were just basically passing time before we were summoned down to the venue, and we were listening to the local radio, and there was a competition on the radio because they said, Buzzcocks are in town tonight, and you can win 2 tickets to the gig. If
Yeah.
you can tell us what their current single is, and I've got a feeling it was "Love You More." And I rang in and entered the competition from the hotel room, and I actually won it.
Oh God. It's just like when you won that meet Slade. You actually won
But then I
two
thought,
tickets
well,
to your gig.
I'm basically deprived two genuine fans from the possibility of getting to the gig.
Well, this is one that actually fascinates me because Buzzcocks, you were only there for 5 years. I mean, they're still going. I know they're still going because I saw them last month. Steve Diggle and Buzzcocks. They played in Preston, and I went to see them.
Right.
But you were actually like in Buzzcocks for 5 years.
It's just less than that, I think. Yeah.
Oh, is it just last?
Five, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And but you've toured America like 3 times, and those photos at Mono Cafe, they're from your American tour. What was I going to say? There's a section. Well, this is sort of like a section in the book that it says when you were in New York, you were actually, someone threatened to beat you up.
Yeah.
And I was all like thinking, it must be difficult for you, because you were only young. You were, you were like maybe in your 20, maybe 20, 21 at the
19,
time, or not
yeah,
18.
that first tour, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? That some American guy wanted to beat you up?
It was a bit. Do you want me to tell a brief version of that story? Basically, yeah, we were the venue we were playing. If I remember rightly, that was Club 57, and we'd done a sound check in the afternoon, and up right behind me, I was sat. It wasn't a very big stage, so I was right against the back wall. And immediately behind me, it was going to be a simultaneous live broadcast on a local radio station. And the radio station had put this huge banner up behind me with their, WPIX 90 whatever FM radio on. And I actually said to her, why have you got that? It's probably been a bit precocious rock and roll, upstart. So what's the point of putting a banner up? Because it's a radio broadcast, your listeners are not going to be able to see it.
Yeah.
And I says, "Oh, don't worry, we'll take it down. We'll take it down before you go on." Said, right, okay. And when we did the sound check. We went back to the hotel. We had something to eat. We're driving back to the venue, and we pull up outside the venue, and it's like we were due on stage in about 15, 20 minutes. But there's a huge crowd outside. And we thought, well, the venue only holds about 1,000 people, and it looks like most of them are still out on the pavement. And we went inside, what's going on? And apparently they were being really tough on security on the door. We're asking everyone to show ID. And the radio broadcast was due to start they'd agreed a time. It was going to be broadcast starting at, I don't know, 9 p.m., let's say. And at 10 to 9, there's about 20 people inside the hall. Everybody else is still trying to get in. They're outside. So we said, well, we're not going on until everybody's coming to the venue. And of course, the radio people are getting all fraught because they're due to start the broadcast at 9 o'clock. And we delayed it until everybody got in, by which time the radio people were really pissed off with us. So when we finally did go on the stage, first thing I see is the banner is still on the wall behind me. So I just ripped it off. And that apparently, there's a guy, one of the radio guys said he was going to kill me for taking this banner down. So we did the set. I don't know anything about any of this until we come off stage. We go into the dressing room, and one of our crew said, "There's a guy from the radio station that wants to kill you." And at which point he comes barging through, trying to get in. And one of our guys, it's really weird. He headbutted this guy from the radio station, literally headbutted him right on the nose. Apparently broke his nose. And then the next thing I remember was somebody grabbed hold of the four of us and I think stuck about $20 in my hand and says, you've got to get out of here. And we went on a fire escape down to just get a taxi back to the hotel. So that was that was our welcome to New York scenario.
Oh my God! So it was like, were you traumatized? But you went back, didn't you? You went back to America after that, or
Yeah. Probably just hope that we don't bump into that same guy. It was all. He popped up on a message board a few years ago. He's still there.
Was he still looking for you?
He wasn't happy. He wasn't happy, understandably, but hey, it's rock and roll.
Yeah, sorry. But well, this I found this one from the Drummer Journal, which is like, I think it's not running anymore, but the drummer, yeah. You were in the very first episode of the Drummer Journal, or the first issue, and apparently in 1978 you were voted second to Keith Moon in the NME's Best Drummer poll. How does that feel? So like
that was weird, because you just think, well, there's a lot of drummers out there, so what is it that makes people want to actually go to the trouble of because these aren't online votes back then. You had to actually get a pen and paper and write on it and put it in an envelope and put a stamp on and put it in the post. But also it was the year that Keith Moon died, and so people were saying to me, well, if he hadn't died, he's only won because he died. And I thought, well, no, if he hadn't died, people probably would have voted for all sorts of other people, But no, it was a real. It was that was like. Yeah, I still take that as a big compliment. The fact that you kind of get noticed and all you're doing is sitting there playing drums. So
yeah, and this is 1978. You're only 18 at the time as well. So it's like, right. That's amazing. That's so good. Well, the other this question is like, I hope you don't mind, but Andrew Clark, he said, do you keep in touch with Steve Diggle, and do you think you'll ever play together again?
I don't. No, we don't. As a band, we never really kept in touch with each other after the split. To be honest, the only communications that take place is usually via a manager sort of person, and it's generally to do with when some TV shows looking to use one of the tracks on the soundtrack, and you've got to give consent and all that.
I see. Yeah.
And then. So really, the last time I spoke to Steve was back in 2019 when we did the Royal Albert Hall Memorial show, and I don't know. I'm guessing that's probably the last time that I would have played. Will have played with them, because I can't see anything. You never know what might crop up, but I can't see anything really that would make me feel like it's something I ought to do. I don't know.
Have you ever been to one of his gigs? One of Buzzcocks?
not since Pete died. In fact, the last time I saw Buzzcocks play live was in 2017. They were playing in Paris, and there was an exhibition, a small art gallery in Paris at the time they were playing there, and the exhibition was centered around all the artwork that Malcolm Garrett did for Buzzcocks, all the sleeve designs and stuff. And for whatever reason, I got an invite to go over and join them for that. So we went to the gallery thing and then went to see the band play that night. And it was a funny experience seeing Buzzcocks in 2017, because that was a period when Pete was very, very static on stage, and Steve Diggle was clearly trying to overcompensate, if you like, for Pete's lack of movement. Steve was all over the shop, Pete Townsend windmilling all sorts, and it was kind of like a really weird thing to look at. And I mean, it's if you bear in mind my association with the band goes back a long time before 2017. So what I've got in my head of what the band's about is very different to what I was witnessing on the stage that night. And
Yeah,
I I didn't really I didn't take to it, to be honest. So
no,
I pretty
yeah,
much just stood at the back talking to Malcolm Garrett about all sorts of stuff through the set, which is probably a bit rude, but had a good catch up
yeah.
with Malcolm instead.
Well, I saw them supporting the Stone Roses in 2016, and that's when Pete Shelley was still around. And I was way up there, so I didn't really. I was just watching the big screen, so I wasn't really sort of like focusing on it. But then last month I saw Buzzcocks, and this is Steve Diggle's one. And one thing I've noticed is he's very pointy. He's like he sort of like point at people, maybe wink at them, and then I was all like thinking, I'm sure if you're a punk, you don't actually do things like you don't sort of like point at people and then wink at them and then go and sort of like point to someone else again. So yeah, but it was good. I really enjoyed it as well. It's a
Good.
shame that it was a festival, so there's no time to sort of
All
like
right.
ask it. Yeah, yeah, it was a Preston sort of like festival thing. But so next one is Laurie Gimzer. Said that I miss Pete Shelley. Have you any funny or fun or interesting stories about working with him?
Blimey, where do you start?
Where do you start?
um, well, yeah, what I was telling this to I think it was Paul Hanley when we were chatting after the event in Glasgow the other week. Um, yeah, Pete. How can I put this? Right, I remember we were doing one of those longish tours of the UK. We were out for like a month. We're basically doing like 28 shows in 30 days type of thing, all around the UK. And I was always the first person to get picked up because I lived nearest the driver, our driver, Pete Monks, he was called. So he would come and collect me, and because we're going away for a month, I've got this huge suitcase packed with, well, obviously a month's worth of
No, yeah, of course.
whatever, when you do something like that. And then the next person to pick up was, I think we went to collect Steve Garvey next. Similar sort of thing. Steve puts his big suitcase in the back of the car. Next, we go and pick up Steve Diggle, big suitcase, go along. Pete's the last one to get collected. We turn up at Pete's house in Gorton, and he comes out with a plastic carrier bag, and it's got a brand new shirt still in the wrapper, and I think he had a brand new pair of jeans in the bag. That was Pete's. That was it for a month.
For,
Yeah.
oh wow!
Um,
Did you go to laundrette to wash it? Like, no.
mm, no, maybe not so much. No. Um, and then because Pete always used to tell this sort of one of these tell a story about the quirks of fame and that, and how that one of the appearances we did for Top of the Pops, we'd be down in London, so obviously we're staying in a hotel. He's thinking,
Yeah.
wow, we're on Top of the Pops, and here I am washing my socks in the sink in the hotel bathroom, and as if that this is fame isn't all it's cut out to be, and so on. And to me, it's just like, well, why didn't you bring another pair of socks? It's an option. So
Oh, it's
I mean, he was a great character, but sometimes he could just sometimes he was like incredibly lazy about certain things. But I shouldn't be speaking ill of the dead. But that, I mean, somebody asked, what are the funny things you remember, and it is daft
yeah,
things
yeah,
like that I
yeah,
recall. And so yeah, there's a slice of the real side of what
yeah,
actually
yeah.
went on.
I mean, I mean, those are all the questions that sort like the people sort of like sent in. But I also wanted to ask you: is it really true that Paul Hanley went to your parents' house and just knocked on the door? to ask for you. And
I'm not sure I can actually. I've got a full recollection of that, but I mean, if Paul says that's what happened, it's true. Because I
yeah,
was asking him the other week. I kind of thought he was maybe like a year. He went to the same school as me, so I thought maybe he was a year below, or that was actually quite a few, 3, 4 years possibly below me. So, because when
yeah,
you're at school, I would have no knowledge of these young little brats or
yeah,
whatever. I suppose it kind of if you put yourself in his shoes, it's probably a bit weird if like his favorite band, the drummer used to go to his school and stuff, and so yeah, they called round, and because
yeah.
when he first told me the story, I said to him, well, what was I like to you? Because I thought, go away. You were great. You were great. You said, "Oh, do you want some badges?" And apparently, I went back inside the house because I had a little set selection of Buzzcocks badges and doled them out to him and his mates. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
No,
in Paul's good books, I think.
I thought that was really amazing because imagine if, I mean, imagine if I knew where Rennie from the Stone Roses, imagine where I know where he lives. And then I'll just sort of like knock on his door and say, "Oh, hello." But in those days, it seems like it's easy, or
Yeah,
so
well,
like, you just,
it's not exactly the same sort of thing, but if you remind me of another story, is that when we produced Spiral Scratch, so now we're talking, this would be like January 1977. Um, a, a, this is a story about Stephen Morrissey, right? And this is obviously before the Smiths.
yeah, yeah,
And Morrissey lived quite near me, like less than a mile away, in Stretford. And he'd taken to hanging around the Buzzcocks New Hormones office in Manchester, and he was such he wrote a letter into NME that I've seen that posted on social media. He's singing the praises of Buzzcocks back then,
yeah.
and when we got copies of Spiral Scratch come through, Richard, our manager, he knew that I lived quite near Morrissey. He said to me, "Would you go and drop off a copy of Spiral Scratch for him?" And I said, "Well, yeah, okay." Now, I'd never met Morrissey at this point. I just knew he was some kid who was a big Buzzcocks fan. So, because I live nearby, I got the job of dropping this copy of Spiral Scratch round to him. So I got the address, went down there on my bicycle, turned up at Morrissey's house and knocked on the door, and his mum answered. And I said, "Oh, is Stephen in? I've got something for him." And so she shouts up the stairs, "Stephen, there's somebody here to see you." And he didn't appear. He just said, "Oh, send them up." So it was like being summoned up into the inner sanctum. And the only recollection I have of it really is that I walked in and he was lay there on the bed or sat at his table or something, and I said, "Oh, Richard Boone's asked me to drop this," and he, "Oh, thank you." That's it.
That was it.
So yeah, I delivered a record to Morrissey.
And how many years, like how long until they became like, like, was it 1984 or 1983 when the Smiths like became, because
It
for
was
us,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, for us, the Filipinos, I mean, it wasn't, especially for me, it wasn't until the Smiths came along that I
Mhm.
got really into Manchester. And I was sort of like, first time I've heard Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now and Girlfriend in a Coma, I just thought, I wanted to go there. I wanted to go to Manchester because
Right.
of the Smiths. So, so those years when they actually became famous, did you sort of like think, I delivered a record to this person? Did you sort of like think that, or
I'd forgotten. I just had it in the back of my mind as this like. To be honest, I came away from his house just thinking, what a miserable twat,
God. Yeah. Oh my God, that was amazing. It was like really good. Have you so like met him since, or
No. No.
no? Wow. Right. Well, Okay, carrying on Discogs, you mentioned the things before, and this was
Okay.
1980. So you didn't leave, or Buzzcocks didn't split up until 1981. So you were doing two bands at the same time, or was it just?
Yeah. It was. I think. Well, Paul Hanley documents it really well in his book because he's obviously done a lot of research on the book. So it's through reading his book that it triggers various memories. Basically, in 1980, Buzzcocks were kind of not doing a lot for various reasons. I think Pete was struggling to come up with material for new songs, and Steve Garvey had sort of got a little side project going with some. I think they were former members of the Fall, some of them, and I got it in my head that I mentioned earlier that I was interested in some of that sort of '60s type of stuff, and there was a record I quite fancied doing a cover version of if I could find the right people to do it with, and so I sort of went out looking for to find people that might help record something along those lines, and
Yeah,
I one night I went to see this band called The Things, and I sort of I knew of a couple of them because I'd seen them at Buzzcocks gigs before. I saw The Things that night, and I thought they're absolutely fantastic. So I got chatting to Tim, the singer, and we got on the subject of like, yeah, I was thinking of looking for people to record something or whatever, and I think I'm not sure if it was there and then or a few days later he got in touch with me and says, why don't you we've lost our drummer, you can come and drum with us. So that's how just that drifted into getting involved with The Things, and
yeah,
it was it was it it was something. It meant that I could, while Buzzcocks was effectively more or less dormant for quite a period, I was able to carry on drumming and with The Things, obviously a completely different level to the sorts of things we've been doing with Buzzcocks, but still in a way just as enjoyable because it was playing music that I
yeah.
really enjoyed doing. I remember we did a gig at Band on the Wall in Manchester, The Things, and someone had arranged. We had a little light show thing going on. It was like the old sort of Pink Floyd bubble, the those sort of weird
Light.
bubbly things. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it was like that. Yes, because you asked earlier what was one of your favourite gigs, and that would rank as one of them. That particular show with The Things,
yeah,
Band on
yeah.
the Wall, small club, great atmosphere, great songs, playing. There was no sort of Buzzcocks related pressure or anything. It was just like playing music for the enjoyment of doing it.
Enjoy. Yeah, yeah. But you only did one single, and then that's it. There was only like on Discogs. There's only one single
That's
by
right.
the thing.
Well, yeah, I funded that. That was me putting something back in, sort of thing.
Oh,
Yeah, it just didn't go anywhere. It was a bit like a replay of doing Spiral Scratch, except I had 1,000 copies pressed up, but it just didn't sell.
oh, I see.
Yeah,
And then they just stopped playing. They just saw like
yeah,
after
like
a
these
while.
things do. They just drift apart.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was good while it lasted.
Yeah, well, another band is I mentioned it earlier, Flag of Convenience, or Buzzcocks FOC, I think it's called as an alias or something.
Yeah.
And Chris Goodwin was a member of it. And another one is a guy called Mark Burke. He also
All right.
sent in, yeah, he sent in a message that he said that I played with John Maher. I was 16 to 18 in Flag of Convenience, and later played with Mike Joyce as well of the Smiths in the band Jeep. I've not heard of the band Jeep, but I looked it up and I couldn't find any information about it. But anyways, so he said that I considered this a comprehensive survey and can confidently state John is the best drummer I ever played with, hands down. So that's from Mark Burke.
Cheers,
So
Mark.
so can you tell us more about Flag of Convenience? Because that's also with Steve Diggle.
Yes. Right. So, well, basically, Pete disbanded Buzzcocks by saying he was leaving. That was all quite a horrible period, and also quite horrible the way that Pete did it, in that he didn't actually talk to us. It was done by a solicitor's letter. So it left everyone with a sour taste in their mouth. So initially, Steve decided he would put this band Flag of Convenience together, and he asked me. I mean, because I was in that period, right? Well, basically right through Buzzcocks. I mean, Steve was like my best friend, best ally in the band.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like, well, yeah, why not? And so I can't even remember how long I stuck it out with Flag of Convenience. It was, we did get kind of record deal with Sire. They put out a 12-inch single, but it didn't translate into anything else. It just felt like we were fighting against the tide, really. So we gave it a go. To be fair, I left. I must have been with Steve in Flag of Convenience for a couple of years, but it wasn't really going anywhere. I left, but Steve did carry on, kind of sometimes intermittently, but he did soldier on. He never gave up. And then that whole weird thing about apparently somebody I think it was a gig in France. They booked Steve's Flag of Convenience to play, but of course they're aware of the fact that he's a former Buzzcock, and on the poster they decided to bill it as Buzzcocks FOC because they figured, well, we're going to get more people in that way. So that's that. Then I think that prompted maybe another solicitor's letter from the Pete Shelley camp to say,
you can't use
that name. Yeah, you can't use that name. But in a weird sort of way, it also then, like, I think across the Atlantic, the rumours started going around that Buzzcocks are back together, and somebody decided to get in touch. I think it was with Pete's manager, and said that, listen, we'll book you a month-long tour. If it's Buzzcocks, we'll book you back. And then that's when the conversation started. This will be sort of sometime around the middle of 1989. And one thing led to another, and the 4 original members reunited and did that month-long tour in the States and a week-long in the UK. At which point I was out, and then going back, you mentioned it. That's when Mike Joyce came in and stepped in on my behalf.
Wow. Oh. So it wasn't like you had 2 drummers, because Chris Goodwin, being a drummer in Flag of Convenience, he was probably joined after you, or was it? Yeah. So he joined after.
Yeah. Part of a dual drummer thing, no.
Yeah, it's not like with Paul Hanley and Funky Cy with House of All. We've got 2 drummers. And...
Yeah.
Okay. Well, another one is Penetration. That's another band that you were in. We talked about with Pauline Murray, and then, well, I should have known that there was like, because Renwick. That's what he mentioned, that Pauline Murray and the Invisible Girls. So you played drums.
That was after Paul after Penetration had split in, I don't know, would it be 79 or something? And then she and Rob Blameyer also was with Penetration. Pauline and Rob came up with this new project. They got Martin Hannett in to produce, and they asked me to come in and play drums on that album. So I wasn't. I don't think it was ever really like an official band. It was more like a group of musicians that had got together for this project, if you like.
Yeah.
Well, we did tour with it. We went to Europe and did dates in the UK around that time. So
that's a recent one, right? Was it a recent one, like in 20 something, or
they did do an Invisible Girls. They did certainly at least 1 or 2. I wasn't involved in that. They had obviously Pauline and Rob. I think they had Steve Hopkins, who was on the keyboard, played keyboards on the original album. I think he might have played on that. So yeah, he briefly resurfaced for a couple of shows. Yeah.
So brilliant. I mean, I remember now who asked about your Volkswagen restoration parts place in Trafford Park. It's Mark Edstall, I think his name. Yeah, Mark Edstall who asked about it. So is it gone now? You don't have that anymore?
No, I've got a VW workshop here in Harris. Yeah.
Oh, you still do it? You still so like so you repair Volkswagen? Because we used to have a camper van.
No, I don't. I don't repair vehicles or anything. I just
Oh,
basically get brand new engine parts. Um, it's like an engineering workshop, if you like. So I do the necessary modifications to make these engines larger and make more
yeah,
power than they were intended to, and built to order. So
yeah. Did
yeah,
you uh, did you have a training like a I don't know, you college training or university training for it, or did you just how did you do it? I mean, I was like,
yeah,
is it
well,
just
yeah. I think it's again, it's taken other people to point this out to me. I suppose it's a bit like that. You know, when I decided I wanted to play drums, and it's just a case of like, right, okay, I'm going to dive into this and do it. And the engine building side was inspired by more or less a similar approach, I guess. Is that the enthusiasm was there, and the knowledge, the that quest for learning how to do it was there as well. So, yeah, self taught
yeah, yeah.
basically. Yeah.
But there must be more to it because you were talking like car parts, right? There was like these are like mechanics, like who's learned it from maybe I don't know their college or whatever. It's like proper school for mechanics, but you just learned it yourself by Did you read books or?
Yeah, well, of course, it's pre-internet stuff, so like anything in written form was really valuable. Like getting hold of the magazines from the USA, monthly magazine over there called Hot VWs, which covered the Volkswagen performance scene over there. It was like, yeah, you had to get hold of those, and then finding. I remember buying a VHS tape of how to. I think it was called How to Hot Rod Your Volkswagen Engine. It was two guys that actually became and still are really good friends of mine over in California. They'd made this video of showing
Yeah.
how they built, basically a racing engine, and so that was gold dust to me. That having that tape where these people who actually had gone and raced these cars down the track were building an engine and showing you how they did it.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was like that thirst for knowledge. It just had to find ways of satisfying it, and then
amazing.
ultimately, getting your hands dirty and learning the hard way, doing it for real.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
learn. It's like with with learning drums. Getting thrown into a band straight off. You'll make mistakes along the way, but
You learning.
you learn
Yeah.
from those. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Mary Ma, your sister said that. Remember the book "Idiot's Guide to Mechanics"?
Yes.
Is that like, well, Aiden had a 1971 Beetle for 5 years, and then a 1963 Volkswagen camper van. We had it for 6 months, but that's just he's not into the sort like the technical side of thing. It was beautiful, and everybody was sort of like everywhere we went, like in Europe and things, people were waving at us and sort of like, but after 6 months it just had to go because he couldn't fix it himself, so it had it needed a specialist to sort of like do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So photography, because nowadays you're more sort of like known is I've seen all these videos and they barely just touch on your days as a drummer for
Mhm.
Buzzcocks, and most of the time it's just that top of the pop sort of like clip. But it's the photography side now that's that you're more well known, because I have seen the photos, and like I said, there's an exhibition at the Mono Cafe on at the moment. It's just a tiny one, but it's still good. And another one is in Athai. You've got an exhibition, a photo exhibition in Athai as well.
Oh, yeah. That again. That's the guy Colin Walsh who instigated the Thai music trail or whatever.
Yeah,
With Johnny Marr and Manny and lots of other people with the Thai association. He did. Um, it must be 2 or 3 years ago. Put on a little exhibition of my pictures, and he's dragged. What's given him the excuse to drag them out again is the fact that Johnny Marr is. I think it's really soon. It's this. I think it's this coming week. He's playing the what used to be called the Dreamland Ballroom in Athai, which is where his mum and dad met.
Oh God, okay.
So
So you
Johnny,
haven't actually got an exhibition there right now. This was like from years
it's
ago.
the pictures that will be on this week. Is basically what Cole's doing is trying to put a series of events around celebrating the fact that Johnny Marr's coming back to Athai, and because of
Ah,
my little connection with the place, that's why the pictures have been coming out again. And I think there's a Thai community centre or something. They'll be on there, and there's a. I'm not the only photographer that's been featured. There's a couple of other guys with connections with the place, and so they're turning it into a. It's not just a gig. They're trying to put more around it as well, make a thing of it.
yeah, yeah. Are you
Cole's,
going? Are you
no,
going?
Colin did actually ask me if I could go over, but just because of other things that I've got on at the moment, I couldn't get over. But I've said to him, I've got to go one day, because it's. I think the last. Obviously, I was in Dublin in '79 with the band, but I've never been back down to the home country since I was about 10, I think.
Oh,
So.
really? Wow.
So it'd be good to go back over at some point and catch up. Actually, meet Colm in person and shake his hand and say thanks, and get
Yeah,
to see my plaque as well.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would like to see that too. Because I was sort of like thinking that it would be nice to go to Ireland or Kildare, County Kildare for a
Mhm.
holiday. Hopefully, if not this year, next year. Um, God, it's absolutely amazing. I've got one important question to ask you. I always ask this sort of like to all the guests. Do you twirl? Do you sort of like when you're playing drums, with the sticks?
No, I've tried
No.
it, um, but no, I didn't. I'm not very good at it, and I think it looks a bit silly.
So you've never done it ever?
No, I
No.
don't think so. I might have on the odd occasion, flip the stick up in the air and then like catch it when it comes down. But when it doesn't work, you just look like a fool. So
And then what I've seen online as well is your photograph with Debbie Harry.
oh,
That's
yeah.
absolutely amazing. Because Mike Joyce, again, he mentioned Debbie Harry during the talk, and you actually got to meet her when you were like, I don't know, 19, 18, 19.
Yeah,
It was
18. Yeah, we got 4 support gigs with Blondie in Europe. Yeah, and so at that point, I mean, I was a big, I was a big Blondie fan anyway, and I was particularly a big fan of Clem Burt, because such a
yeah, yeah.
fantastic drummer. So when that got announced, in Belgium and Holland, we did those 4 shows with them. And the thing is, they were really nice to us as well, and Clem was, in fact, I was watching a documentary last night about Studio 54 in New York. Went to New York in 1980, and Clem took me and my wife Helen to Studio 54. I think it was in its decline then, but we can at least claim that we have been to Studio 54.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a famous one. I remember even when I was a kid, I remember that they even had their own clothes, so like clothing lines as well. Those sort of like shorts that they wear apparently in
Oh
Studio
yeah,
54.
yeah. There's a great documentary just been on the other night on BBC4 about Studio 54, the whole history of the
Oh,
place.
wow. Yeah. Well, drumming hero. Someone asked. I think someone asked you that before. Any drumming heroes? Do you have
Well,
any?
Clem Burt was certainly one.
Thunberg. Yeah.
I've gone on, and people are probably now figuring out who's this guy Hans Waterman out of Solution. Definitely, I don't think a lot of punk style drummers will relate to it, but fantastic drummer nonetheless. I always really liked the guy out of the Comsat Angels,
Oh, yeah.
especially their album Sleep No More. I think there's some really very powerful, very inventive, creative drumming on that. So I've never
Yeah.
met him, but he definitely fits the bill of like a drummer who adds so much to the music. It would be so much less without him doing what he does.
Yeah.
Um, I think I might have mentioned Pete Thomas out of Elvis Costello's band, The Attractions.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
ever really a big Elvis Costello fan, but certainly really enjoyed listening and watching Pete Thomas play. He's a really great drummer. Plays a big, tall, gangly guy, plays a little four-piece kit, and what he produces from that little kit is brilliant. I love it when you see somebody with a quite a small kit, but just gets so much out. Charlie Watts, of course, is a classic for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you just know not to be too busy.
Yeah. Um, what
Just
about
fix my lovely camera.
what about advice? Because you left school to join a punk band. Do you have kids?
No,
You don't.
no,
Oh, okay. But
no.
if you saw like the kids nowadays, I mean, would you advise? Or would you tell them that yeah, you can leave school? Because obviously your parents were very supportive of you, and your sister Mary.
Yeah.
But would you say to a kid that yeah, leave school and join a punk band if you want?
Um, I don't know. It was funny, a bit weird when people asked that sort of advice question because if I think of it in my own terms, I didn't ask anybody for advice. I just kind of decided that's what I'm going to do. And if someone had said, uh, like my mum and dad had said, no, you can't do that, I probably would have just gone and done it anyway. Um, so,
Yeah,
if a kid came and asked me, I'm 16 years old, I'm thinking of quitting school to go on the road with this band. Um, I think the best answer I could give them is no, don't do it. And then thinking, well, if they were anything like had the same attitude as myself, they would completely ignore what I just said and go and do it anyway.
yeah,
So, if they're going to listen to any advice from me, it's like maybe they're not. They should, yeah, they should just go with what they think's right, which is might be the right answer, it might be the wrong answer. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. When's your next? Because like you went to Glasgow for the Paul Hanley event. When's the next time you're going out, going out the outer everydays to be saying another book event or maybe an exhibition or whatever? Do you think
Nothing. Don't think we've got anything confirmed yet. But the photographs that you've seen at Mono, there's the possibility that they may get exhibited, again in a more conventional gallery. There's nothing confirmed as yet, but there's a couple
Oh,
of things, possibilities that I'm aware of at the moment. But until again, with these sorts of exhibition things, I know it's like places tend to get booked up way, way, way in advance, and you can never
yeah,
really bank on it. So I've just learned to go with the flow on that. But hopefully, the photos from that late 70s, 79,
yeah,
80, I think there's a good possibility that they might get another outing or
yeah.
two.
And you've got more. Apparently, you've got like over 200 of them or something. So
Yeah,
there'll be
there's about 200. I wouldn't say that all 200 merit being put up on the gallery wall, but no, it's just amazing that because when those pictures were taken, unlike the sort of photography I do today, where there's always the thing in mind of like this might end up on a gallery wall. That was just a 19-year-old kid wandering around America taking
yeah,
pictures because it's like, wow, I'm in America. No clue or thought even that 40, what is it? It's
yeah,
45 years, for God's sake, that they'd be, put up on a wall somewhere, that's amazing, with that
yeah.
little Olympus trip camera, just trying to capture my version of what I thought America was about.
Yeah, that's amazing. We've got one more. So, like from Stuart Kerr, he said Mick McNeil from Simple Minds stays on Harris. Is this island full of fantastic musicians? So do you know Mick McNeil from Simple
Oh,
Minds?
no.
No, oh sorry, because I was all like thinking, there are only 2,000 people on the Alavari,
Yeah. Yeah.
but of course, yeah, you don't know. Oh my God, when are you coming back to Manchester?
Yeah, I haven't been back in. I think the last time I was down there was it was for a Louder Than Words event. You know, the book festival.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was there in oh, it must be like 3 years ago, I think. Um, it was
well,
just after the easing of lockdown restrictions. It was weird. It was totally weird coming
oh
from
okay,
Paris into
yeah,
the
yeah,
centre of Manchester. Yeah, it was quite a bizarre
yeah.
experience.
I think that's the
Um,
one.
but
Yeah, yeah, that's
I'll end up back down there at some point. I mean, I've still got two sisters that live there. Mary and my younger sister Helen's in can't be too far away from you. She's over Stockport way.
in Stockport as well.
Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that must be the year that I didn't so like volunteer for Louder Than Words just after lockdown. Because
yeah,
I do I do sort of like voluntary work at Louder Than Words Festival, and I don't remember sort of like seeing your name. So that must be sort of like when I didn't go there.
the reason I
So
was there was there was a book out. It's yeah, another book. It was a book about Pete Shelley, the Buzzcocks, the Lost Tapes.
oh, I see.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Louis Shelley, she's called. It's actually a very good book. She did a lot of interviews with Pete and quite interesting stories. You know, it's almost like Pete. I reckon Pete could have done a really good book about Buzzcocks, but probably too lazy to have got around to it. But
yeah,
he did a lot of those interviews with Louis, and she put that into a book, and she sent me a copy of it. I supplied some photographs for it actually, and she sent me a copy. I don't know what I was expecting, but I confess when I read it, I thought she'd done a great job. So when she said she was
yeah,
going to promote it at that festival and invited me to come and do a chat, basically a discussion panel about the book, a presentation
yeah,
about the
yeah,
book. I was
yeah.
yeah, that'd be quite a good thing to do. So
Yeah, well, he's done his lyrics. I bought a copy of his lyrics book.
yeah,
You know, all the songs. That I've got
yeah,
that one.
yeah.
Have you ever been to the mural in Lee?
No, I've not.
Yeah,
I've seen loads of pictures of it, but I've never actually been to it.
yeah, yeah. Uh, uh, well, are you thinking of going? So, like maybe someday in
I
during
guess
this.
I'll probably, if I'm down in Manchester, it'd be rude not to, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm sure I'll get to see it one day, but
yeah.
if I'm
Oh,
spared, yeah.
God, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this conversation with you because I like going to sort of like events, but I feel shy sort of like asking or talking to musicians because I feel like, oh, what am I going to say? But for drummers, I'm very, very so like interested in their stories. So that's why I always sort of like say, oh, I've got these podcasts. Please, would you like to go there? And I'm really, really grateful that you said yes to Ask the Drummer.
No
Thank
problem.
you so
Thanks for
much.
inviting me.
I still so like don't want to call you John because you're a legend, Mr. Mars. Like, thank you. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you here in Manchester someday. Or if you've got another sort of like book event with Paul Hanley. I think it's finished now, all these book events or something. I
Yeah,
think the last one was
I'm
the
not
last
sure if
one.
he might have a few more, but I think he's done quite a lot. So I
Yeah,
think he
yeah,
might
yeah.
be winding it down a bit. But no,
Yeah.
it was good. It was good to get the invite to Mono, and that spun on to getting the photos up, and these things have a habit of one thing leads to another. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to like seeing you again at an event. So thank you so much. Um, Amazing. And of course, thank you to everyone who sent in their questions because it's sort of like I'm glad that you managed to sort of like answer all of them.
also, yeah, I didn't really. This is longer than your normal podcast by
I know.
a huge margin.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I'm sure I've seen the videos. It's a nice place, but I think it takes a certain type of person to actually sort of like do what you do. Because I was just sort of like saying to my husband, there's no way I could live in a place like the Isle
You'd miss the
of
sounds.
yeah, it's just, but it's amazing. And all those sort of like abandoned houses and, going to them and the photographs that you take and things. You really are a legend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And,
Thanks for inviting me onto the
yeah,
podcast.
no, right. So, yeah, see you again soon,
All right.
hopefully. Yeah,
Cheers,
thank
everyone.
you.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye. Bye. Oh my God. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us live. Mr. John Maher. I was like, for the whole week, I've been thinking of what to do, and there was all like today before we actually came on live, I was just really, really nervous because I didn't know what to say. I know I always say he's a legend, but he is. He really is a legend. I mean, absolutely amazing. I feel like crying now, but yeah, thank you all so much, everyone. Stuart Kerr, Joe McCartney, Mary Ma, thank you very much. John Ma's sister, thank you for joining us live. Right, so I'm gonna be back next week with actually two drummers, two episodes next week, one at 2 o'clock and then one at 5 o'clock. So hopefully some of you will be able to sort of like join me again next week. Oh my god, I'm just so happy. Right, because yeah, and and enjoy the rest of your weekend, all of you. And as always, love music, love life, love drummers. Thank you so much, John Ma. Oh God, it's absolutely amazing. And I hope to see you all again next week, next Sunday. Bye for now. Bye.